Chapter 209. For the next period of time, Su Zimo returned to his normal cultivation. During the day, he spent some time to raise his cultivation realm and most of his time on weapon refinement. At night, Su Zimo's cave abode was tightly shut and he activated the formation to begin his demonic cultivation and organs refinement. Because organs refinement would produce an endless amount of thick demonic chi, the formation could not only prevent outsiders from entering, it could also conceal the aura within the cave abode. The next morning, all the demonic chi would be absorbed into Su Zimo's body. For the past few days, Monkey, Linghu and Little Crane circled around the demon beast egg day and night. Monkey incubated it for 10 hours and Little Crane was next. Every day, when it was late at night, the spirit tiger would only have 4 hours to rest. Linghu hugged the demon beast egg to his chest and even licked it from time to time, blinking his tiger eyes and sighing. At this rate, no matter who's the boss in the end, I'm going to be the last one. Linghu looked at the demon beast egg and lamented internally, hurry up and come out. That way, I'll still have a lackey. Otherwise, I won't be able to live in the future. That damned monkey and stupid bird are going to bully me to death. 4 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Linghu felt as though he had just hugged the demon beast egg and had yet to warm it when Monkey came up and carried it to the side, sitting on it. Although Linghu was indignant, he did not dare to resist and could only watch pitifully from the side. For some reason, Su Zimo felt that Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane were very concerned about the demon beast egg and were afraid of knocking it. Apart from the three of them, no one else was allowed to touch it. He did not know if it was the effect of Su Zimo's bloodline or the three of them taking turns to look after it. After a few days, there was indeed a reaction from the demon beast egg. The demon beast egg began to emit a wave of life energy. Initially, it was weak. However, as time passed by, it became clearer and stronger. When they heard that Su Zimo brought back a demon beast egg from a ruin, the divine guardian beast of the sect, Senior Crane, visited a few times as well and paid attention to the incubation process of the demon beast egg. During this period of time, Su Zimo had also browsed through many ancient books regarding demon beasts. He memorized all sorts of information regarding demon beasts, ancient remnant beasts and pure-blooded ferocious beasts. According to Senior Crane, the birth of a pure-blooded ferocious beast would alarm the heavens and cause a universal phenomenon. The stronger the ferocious beast's bloodline was, the more intense and frightening the phenomenon would be. Of the world of the ferocious beast egg, the sky, of course, of the world of the heavens, would be dyed red and there would even a rain of fire. Rain. Flood of the world 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 of time of the world of the world of the world of the world, for at least 7 days of the time. Of the world of the world of the of time, the of the world of the world of the world, world. Of the of the of the of the of the of. Ever since the ancient era, there had been countless examples of that. Although there were no universal phenomenons, the birth of an ancient remnant beast would be accompanied by a resplendent glow, indicating that its bloodline was extraordinary and its future accomplishments would be different from other demon beasts. A month later, the life within the demon beast egg intensified and was almost at its peak. This meant that the life within the demon beast egg could descend at any moment. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt a little nervous as well. Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane busied themselves for an entire month and spent most of their attention on the demon beast egg. Su Zimo truly could not tell who the spirit beast would follow after it hatched. This day, Monkey, who was initially squatting on the demon beast egg, shuddered and leaped up. Monkey's strange behavior attracted the gazes of Linghu and Little Crane. Su Zimo opened his eyes and looked forward as well. Not far away, the demon beast egg shook gently on the ground and a new life was struggling within, wanting to come into the world. All of a sudden, a beautiful red-haired woman appeared in the cave abode. It was Senior Crane in human form. She glared at the demon beast egg with a grim expression and pursed her lips in silence. Swash! Su Zimo's vision blurred and another cultivator appeared in the cave abode. His aura was strong and his gaze was introverted. It was Patriarch Ling Yun. Although Patriarch Ling Yun had never been here before, it was clear that he was paying attention to this matter in secret. Before long, the 5 peak masters, Wen Xian, Xian Yi and the disheveled old man, arrived together. Right after, many other grand elders of the sect arrived. There were old men with white hair and beards and old women with wooden staffs. Everyone looked at the demon beast egg on the ground with a hint of anticipation in their eyes. Jining Zhenjuan was the only one who could become a grand elder in the sect. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. The commotion this time round was not small. Apart from an attack on a sect or a calamity, there was probably nothing else that could gather so many people together. These people were the top cultivators of Misty Peak. The initially spacious cave abode seemed a little cramped after these people entered. Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane sat down in 3 different directions, maintaining a distance from the demon beast egg that was neither too far nor too close, protecting it in the middle. Su Zimo was squeezed out of the crowd. It would have been fine if it was an ordinary demon beast that was hatched and not many people would pay attention to it. However, everyone heard that the demon beast egg was picked up from a ruin and there were many mysterious and complicated patterns etched on the surface of the egg. That was something that everyone had to pay attention to. Yes, those patterns are indeed mysterious. Even with my knowledge, I can't tell what's on it, a nascent soul old man said slowly after staring at the demon beast egg for a long time. An old woman frowned. It seems like some sort of inheritance is recorded on it. Seems like this demon beast has quite a background and isn't simple, another person nodded. Right then, the demon beast egg that was initially shaking violently suddenly stopped, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone held their breaths. It was so silent that one could hear a pin drop in the massive cave abode. Crack! There was a crisp sound. Everyone's eyes lit up. A faint crack appeared on the surface of the demon beast egg. After a momentary pause. Crack! 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 A series of sounds came from the surface of the demon beast egg. In the blink of an eye, 3 more cracks appeared on the egg shell. They became clearer and spread out in all directions densely. All of a sudden. Piak! A small hole appeared at the top of the egg shell. A pitch-black claw peeled open the egg shell bit by bit and was the first to reach out. Senior Crane's red-headed beauty's eyes dimmed in disappointment. Patriarch Lingyun frowned and sighed gently. Some of the nascent soul grand elders released their spirit consciousnesses as well and checked outside the cave abode. They only retracted their spirit consciousnesses when they did not discover anything amiss. It was calm outside and there were no signs of a universal phenomenon. This meant that the demon beast before them was no longer a pure-blooded ferocious beast. Many grand elders shook their heads. The reason why they came was to see if a pure-blooded ferocious beast could be nurtured. If this was a pure-blooded ferocious beast, it would be the biggest event in the sect for thousands of years. Unfortunately, everyone came in high spirits but now, they were disappointed. Chapter 210. Su Zimo had once fantasized about how great it would be if he could give birth to a pure-blooded ferocious beast. However, the moment that life was truly born, Su Zimo could sense a hint of bloodline connection. It was faintly discernible but extremely subtle. Su Zimo smiled gently. No matter what the demon beast's potential or bloodline was, Su Zimo had decided to keep it by his side and raise it. Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane stared at the broken eggshell in the middle nervously with widened eyes filled with curiosity. In the hearts of Monkey and Little Crane, this little fella was something they had nurtured together. Notwithstanding the fact that it was not a pure-blooded ferocious beast or an ancient remnant beast, even if it was a sow, they would have to take care of it carefully and not let this little fella suffer. In Linghu's heart, it was best if this little fella was an ordinary demon beast and the weaker it was, the better. That way, its status would naturally rise and it would not be bullied all the time. At the same time, it could take in a lackey and bully this little fella on a whim to have some fun, caw, caw. Linghu opened its mouth wide and drooled, smiling foolishly as it was completely immersed in fantasizing about its beautiful future. Piak! Another small claw reached out. It was pitch black, and it tore at both sides forcefully. The cracks on the eggshell widened. When they saw that, everyone in the cave abode was even more disappointed as they shook their heads and sighed. It was one thing if there were no universal phenomenons and it was not a pure-blooded ferocious beast. But why was there no light at all when the eggshell was broken? What did that prove? It proved that this demon beast was not an ancient remnant beast as well. All the top cultivators of Misty Peak had gathered here, and yet, they were only here to witness the birth of an ordinary demon beast. The difference was way too great. There were many ordinary demon beasts in the sect as well. Poof! A slightly larger crack appeared on the eggshell and a black head popped out. It looked a little like a dog and its eyes were tightly shut, looking extremely weak. Little Beast seemed to be hungry as it sniffed a few times before grabbing the eggshell shards beside it and stuffing them into its mouth. Crunch, crunch, crunch. After a while, the little beast finished eating the fist-sized eggshell. This time, the little beast's figure and appearance were completely exposed in front of everyone. The little critter's entire body was bald and swarthy. It was not known if it was because it had just eaten the eggshell, but its body was a little bloated. The cave once again fell into silence. The atmosphere was strange. Everyone looked at the little beast with strange expressions, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Although everyone had already determined that this little beast was neither a pure-blooded ferocious beast nor an ancient remnant, it was still too ordinary. An old man shook his head and said, "When a normal demon beast descendant is born, although there are no natural anomalies or colorful lights, because it has been nurtured in its mother's body for a long time, it will be contaminated with demonic aura. The stronger the demonic aura, the stronger the demonic beast is. But this little beast, The old man didn't continue speaking, but everyone saw it clearly. The little beast did not emit any beastly aura from the moment it broke out of its shell. This meant that the little beast could not even be considered as a demon beast, it could only be considered as a wild beast. This little beast doesn't have much intelligence and can't even open its eyes. It's too weak. The old woman at the side shook her head. Although the old woman's words were unpleasant, they were the truth. Everyone knew that if it was a wild beast, it meant that it was not sentient and did not have much intelligence. By then, the little beast had already arrived in front of the Linghu. The Linghu licked his huge face and leaned over, revealing what he thought was the kindest smile. The little beast paused for a moment and walked around the Linghu's huge face, continuing forward. Ugh, the smile on the Linghu's face froze. This is King awkward. The Linghu wanted to cry but no tears came out as he cursed internally, "You're so dishonest. You're going to kill me." The Linghu turned around immediately and looked at Monkey with a fawning expression, feeling a deep sense of guilt and regret for his provocation earlier on. Monkey ignored the Linghu completely and stared at the little beast the entire time. Even though it had just learned how to walk with its eyes closed, the little beast still wobbled its way through the crowd and finally arrived before the Su Zimo with much difficulty. Chapter 2:11. Little Beast raised its head and sniffed carefully a few more times, as though it was confirming. A moment later, Little Beast began to crawl towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo was seated cross-legged on the ground and was not considered tall. However, Little Beast was too short and tried to climb up Su Zimo's robes a few times but to no avail. Instead, it fell a few times and caused a series of laughter. The many grand elders began to leave. There was no point in staying here any longer. Although this black bear was cute, it was merely a wild beast and was no different from the wild rabbits and dogs by the roadside. Su Zimo was not bothered at all. No matter what, he was going to raise this little beast and turn it into a powerful existence. So what if it was a wild beast? He did not have a spirit root to begin with, and yet, didn't he step onto the path of cultivation and become a cultivator as well? The birth of a life was not something one could choose. However, the path one took in the future and the kind of achievements one could obtain would require hard work and opportunities. After falling a few times, Little Beast was covered in dust and dirt. It closed its eyes and rubbed gently against Su Zimo's feet, looking aggrieved. Su Zimo hardened his heart and did not say anything to help it, wanting Little Beast to climb up on its own. Yeah. Little beast raised its head and opened its toothless mouth, using all its strength to cry out in a pitiful manner. Su Zimo's heart softened and he could not hold on any longer. He hurriedly reached out and lifted Little Beast up. Perhaps it was because it was just born, Little Beast was not big. It was about half a foot long and fit perfectly on his palm. Su Zimo smiled gently and lifted Little Beast with his left hand. Reaching out with his right hand, he teased it up and down with interest. Zimo, this black bear's potential is too poor. Don't sign a blood oath with it. The disheveled old man was worried and came over to remind him. Although the power of a blood oath was strong, its power would weaken the more blood oaths were signed, and there was no guarantee that demon beasts would not kill their masters in the future. Therefore, generally speaking, most cultivators would only sign a blood oath with one demon beast, or at most two. To the disheveled old man and the others, Su Zimo's life would be in danger at any moment if he continued to sign a blood oath with the demon beast. Patriarch Ling Yun also nodded toward Su Zimo, and said, "This little beast's intelligence has yet to develop, just raise it casually." With that, Ling Yun turned and left. When the 5 peak masters saw Su Zimo hanging his head and not saying a word, they thought that he was depressed and had suffered a great blow. They couldn't help but sigh and leave the place. At this moment, Su Zimo lowered his head and looked at the little beast on his lap. His gaze was strange and he seemed to be deep in thought. At first, Su Zimo also thought that the little beast was just an ordinary wild beast. Perhaps it was really a bear cub that had not yet developed its spiritual wisdom and was just a little cute. But just now, the little beast's action changed Su Zimo's mind. This little beast was most likely not as simple as everyone said. Earlier on, Su Zimo's right hand was playing with the little beast. Suddenly, the little beast's expression changed, as though it sensed something. It stuck its nose out and sniffed carefully on Su Zimo's right hand. Finally, the little beast opened its mouth and sucked on Su Zimo's right fingertip. It licked it and changed into a comfortable position before falling asleep. That action didn't seem like much. However, there were ripples in Su Zimo's heart. His right hand was his strongest trump card and had helped him avert danger twice. In the entire cave abode, no one knew the secret of his right hand. Even Senior Crane did not know about it. However, this little beast had just been born and could not even open its eyes. Yet, it sensed something and tried its best to lean over, biting on his right finger. That was definitely not a coincidence. Senior Crane was still in the cave abode and had not left. Raising his head, Su Zimo could not help but ask, "Senior, do you recognize this little beast?" Senior Crane walked over slowly and stood in front of Su Zimo. She looked at the little beast carefully before shaking her head. I don't remember seeing a demon beast as such. Could it have been left out in the ancient books?" Su Zimo asked again. "That's possible," Senior Crane said in a deep voice. "After all, it's been too long since the primordial era. Coupled with the fact that there are many demon beasts and many of them are already extinct, there might be some that were left out." Pausing for a moment, Senior Crane continued, "However, there are indeed no universal phenomenons, lights or demonic chi when this beast was born. Perhaps, this is just an ordinary bear cub." As she said that, Senior Crane bent down and reached out, wanting to touch the little beast gently. All of a sudden, the little beast that was initially asleep suddenly woke up. Although its eyes were still closed, it was clear that it was a little nervous. As though it had sensed an unfamiliar aura approaching, the little beast stuck its head out and sniffed. The claws that were initially hidden in the gaps of its palms extended slowly, shimmering with a dark and cold glint. What sharp senses! Su Zimo's eyes lit up. One had to know that this little beast had only been born for less than an hour. It couldn't even open its eyes. However, it could still sense the unfamiliar aura in its deep slumber and wake up. Such a reaction was even more proof of the little beast's extraordinariness. Su Zimo was a little happy. "Fu," Senior Crane froze for a moment before chuckling. "This little fellow is rather smart." With that said, Senior Crane reached out and tapped the little beast's forehead dotingly. Hurriedly, the little beast dodged. However, its movements were way too slow and it could not even maintain its balance. As though it realized that it could not dodge, the little beast reached out hurriedly and scratched Senior Crane's palm in a fluster. When he saw that, Su Zimo smiled. This little beast was rather interesting and even knew how to retaliate. Su Zimo was about to speak when he realized that Senior Crane had a strange expression and was motionless on the spot. "Senior, what's wrong?" Frowning, Su Zimo asked instinctively. "Wrong." A moment later, Senior Crane finally snapped back to her senses. As though she was shaken out of her senses, she repeated repeatedly, "Wrong, we were all wrong." "What do you mean?" Su Zimo was confused. Senior Crane looked at the little beast that was hiding in Su Zimo's embrace with a strange glint in her eyes. Chapter 212. Even though he did not know the background of this little beast, it was not hard to imagine how terrifying it would be once it grew up. This little beast's background is definitely not simple. Take good care of it and it'll definitely be of great help to you in the future. Senior Crane said and took a closer look at little beast, her eyes filled with doubt. What was going on? There were no universal phenomenons, resplendent lights or even demonic chi. How could this little beast possess such frightening lethality? Senior Crane shook her head, unable to figure it out no matter how hard she thought, and left in confusion. Before she left, Senior Crane was still worried and turned around, reminding, "Right, be more careful and keep an eye on it. Don't let it run around the sect." "Don't worry, Senior," Su Zimo nodded. "I'll guard it for this period of time and won't let anything happen to it." In Su Zimo's opinion, little beast had just been born and could not even open its eyes. It did not know anything and was at its weakest. If it were to run around the sect, it could easily die. Senior Crane's mouth twitched and she rolled her eyes in a human-like manner. "I'm worried that something might happen to others." Su Zimo, Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane only walked over after Senior Crane left. Linghu had mocked Monkey earlier on and was taught a lesson by the latter. Little Crane was watching the show at the side and none of them noticed the conversation between the crane and Su Zimo. After Linghu returned, he looked at Little Beast with a bitter expression and lamented internally, Black Bear, I'm really dead because of you. I'll remember this debt for now and settle it with you when you're older." Humph. Little Beast was truly way too short and Linghu was worried that he would slap it half to death with a casual slap. After a day, Little Beast was able to open its eyes. Its eyes were pitch black and sparkling like a pair of resplendent gems that were filled with spirituality. During this day, Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane left the sect and brought back a lot of demon beast milk, placing it all in front of Little Beast. Little Beast sniffed for a moment but did not eat it. He seemed to be a little disgusted. The little critter chose to turn back and continue sucking on Su Zimo's right hand's finger. Perhaps it was because of the eggshell. For an entire week, the little beast was not hungry at all. The most common thing the little beast did was to lie on Su Zimo's knees, with Su Zimo's right finger in its mouth, and have a good sleep. During this period of time, Su Zimo vaguely understood the little beast's temperament. The little beast was the closest to him. Basically, it would pester him every day. The little beast was extremely sensitive to unfamiliar auras. As long as a stranger approached, the little beast would be on guard and even counterattack. Other than Su Zimo, it was rather close to Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane. From this point of view, the monkey and the others didn't waste their time in the past month. Sometimes, the four of them would play around in the cave abode and play together. Each time he saw that, Su Zimo would feel a sense of warmth and smile. A week later, the little beast's teeth were basically all grown out. Although they were still small, they were extremely sharp and were not weaker than its claws. However, what confused Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane was that no matter what spirit beast they hunted, Little Beast would only sniff it and not eat it. Even if it was hungry, Little Beast would not touch the blood food with Su Zimo's finger in its mouth. That's strange, Su Zimo could not understand it either. Could Little Beast be a vegetarian? On second thought, Su Zimo realized that that could not be right. Little Beast's claws and teeth did not look like it was a vegetarian at all. For the past few days, Su Zimo did not cultivate much. Instead, he specially refined a few cauldrons of elixirs and selected the supreme grade and perfect grade ones to feed Little Beast. However, the Little Beast did not take a single bite of the elixirs that Monkey, Linghu, and Little Crane were fighting over. "That's strange," Su Zimo tapped Little Beast's forehead and chided softly, "Why aren't you eating anything, Kia." Little Beast had yet to master the language of the demon race completely and could only squeak and blink its black diamond-like eyes in a wrong manner. This day, Monkey and Little Crane went out to hunt. Su Zimo sat on the stone bed with spirit stones in his hands, as though he was cultivating and could not be distracted. The chance is here. During this period of time, Linghu had been cultivating the Void Thunder Manual and felt that his strength had increased significantly. He was already a Foundation Establishment spirit demon. Linghu rubbed his palms and was prepared to make use of this opportunity to teach Little Beast a lesson. He wanted to establish a dignified, and irresistible image in Little Beast's heart. "Black Bear, stop sleeping. Wake up for me." Linghu snuck in front of Little Beast and suddenly growled. He slapped the back of his hand towards Little Beast's head. Initially, Little Beast was still asleep. However, it shuddered and instinctively reached out with its claws to block. A flash of blood appeared. Instantly, a few bloody holes appeared on Linghu's tiger paw. Linghu was dumbfounded. Little Beast was completely awake as well. "Groar!" Linghu cried out in pain and glared at Little Beast with a grim expression. Gritting his teeth, he hollered, "Black Bear, you're not being honest. Why are you so nervous even when you're sleeping? You've got me in trouble." Little Beast inched over embarrassedly and licked the wounds on Linghu's palm to comfort him. "This is completely different from what I imagined. After the Black Bear was born, I was still the weakest." Linghu was in tears and sorrowful. At this moment, Monkey strode in from outside the cave abode. His entire body was covered in blood and he carried a leopard on his shoulder. His body was massive like a small mountain and his body was covered in jade-green fur. Jade Cloud Leopard. Su Zimo recognized the origin of the leopard right away. It was an ancient remnant beast that was extremely strong. The Jade Cloud Leopard's head was smashed and it was covered in wounds. It was clearly dead. There were many wounds on Monkey's body as well. It was clear how intense the battle was. The moment the Jade Cloud Leopard's corpse was put down, Little Beast suddenly jumped down from Su Zimo's body and sniffed it. Shing! Little Beast reached out with its claws and sliced through the Jade Cloud Leopard's flesh with ease. Opening its mouth, it tore off a piece of meat and swallowed it. When he saw that, he gradually narrowed his eyes. During this period of time, Su Zimo had been observing Little Beast the entire time. In more than 10 days, Little Beast's body had grown a little and it was no longer bloated. It no longer resembled a black bear. Little Beast's head was like a dog and its body was like a tiger. It was pitch black without any fur, and when it retracted its claws, it moved silently. Su Zimo had taken a closer look at Little Beast's claws and teeth. Be it in terms of structure or sharpness, it was something he had never seen before. Furthermore, in the past few days, Little Beast had vaguely revealed a frightening talent in combat as it played around. That talent in combat seemed to be more like an instinct. Extremely sharp claws and teeth, a sharp sense of smell, immense strength, shocking burst power, frightening talent in combat. A demon beast like that was practically born to kill. In front of Su Zimo, Monkey, Linghu and Little Crane, Little Beast appeared extremely obedient and adorable. However, in the dead of the night, Little Beast would get up quietly and patrol the cave abode with a cold gaze. Occasionally, Little Beast would look up at the full moon at the entrance of the cave abode and exude an inexplicable aura. It was ancient and mysterious, as though it was a god that walked the mortal realm in the night. "How about? I call you Night Spirit from now on," Su Zimo murmured softly. Chapter 213. After half a month, Su Zimo discovered that the Night Spirit, also known as the mysterious Little Beast, was very picky with its food. It would not touch the flesh of ordinary demon beasts at all. The night spirit would only choose to eat the flesh of ancient remnant beasts. Furthermore, it did not seem to like it much and ate very little. Su Zimo did not think too much about it and merely treated it as though he did not find the right food. After all, most demon beasts would not eat all types of demon beasts, they would only prefer certain types of demon beasts. Su Zimo was prepared to bring the night spirit out after it grew a little older so that it could search for demon beasts on its own. As time passed by, the surface of the night spirit's body started to turn rough, as though something was about to grow out. A month later, the disheveled old man suddenly visited. Zimo, I've got good news. The moment the disheveled old man entered, he said with a smile, get ready. Wen Xian and a few elders of the sect will bring you guys to a place 3 days later. Ah, where? Su Zimo asked. There's a valley 50 kilometers away from the sect called Dongling Valley. Dongling Valley has a unique geography and is a natural place for qi gathering. All the surrounding spirit qi is gathered within the valley before being channeled into a spirit pool. The disheveled old man said, once every 10 years, the spirit pool will be filled and it will open once, allowing the perfected foundation establishment cultivators of the sect to enter to cultivate. A year of cultivation inside is equivalent to 5 years of cultivation outside. Su Zimo nodded. In that case, Dongling Valley was truly a blessed land. Suddenly, Su Zimo was puzzled. Master, I'm not at perfected foundation establishment either. The disheveled old man chuckled. Initially, this had nothing to do with you. However, Elder Chen of the sect made a suggestion to let some inner sect disciples with great potential enter the spirit pool to cultivate as well. Elder Chen even specially mentioned your name in the main hall of Ethereal Palace. Oh? Su Zimo was slightly surprised. He had not been in the inner sect for long and had spent most of his time in seclusion. He truly did not know who Elder Chen was. The disheveled old man continued, Zimo, you have to thank Elder Chen properly when you see him 3 days later. Su Zimo nodded. During the period of time after returning to the sect, Su Zimo's time was split. He studied weapon refinement and the candlelight sword formation at the same time, as well as immortality and demonic, as well as taking care of the night spirit. With such a rare opportunity, Su Zimo could put everything aside and focus on his cultivation so that he could break through as soon as possible. In the blink of an eye, 3 days. A days as well as Zimo. As well as Zimo's as well as Dongling. Furthermore, Dongling Valley was a place for cultivators to raise their cultivation. Monkey and the rest wouldn't be of much use there. However, when it heard that Su Zimo was leaving, the night spirit squeaked non-stop, insisting on tagging along. After hesitating for a long time, Su Zimo's heart softened and he agreed. For the past month, under Su Zimo's strict orders, the night spirit had not taken a single step out of the cave abode. It's time for it to go out and see the outside world. At that thought, Su Zimo stuffed the night spirit into his clothes and instructed it not to come out before leaving the cave abode. The gathering point was the mountain in front of the sect. The moment Su Zimo arrived, he caught sight of 2 familiar faces. Little Fatty and Ling Ro. Bro, over here. Little Fatty waved. Ling Ro nodded gently and greeted, Junior Brother Su. Given Ling Ro's character, it was already unprecedented for her to take the initiative to address someone as Junior Brother Su. After not meeting for a while, Little Fatty and Ling Ro had already entered late-stage foundation establishment. Of course, that did not mean that Su Zimo's cultivation speed was not fast enough. On the contrary, Su Zimo's cultivation speed was extremely fast. Even though he split most of his attention on elixir refinement, weapon refinement, formation and demonic cultivation, his cultivation realm did not fall behind. Beside Little Fatty and Ling Ro stood more than 30 inner sect disciples. Su Zimo swept his gaze across them. The cultivation realms of these inner sect disciples were all at the late stage of foundation establishment. Su Zimo raised his brow and did not say anything. As time passed by, more cultivators arrived one after another. Su Zimo had been observing the entire time. Be it the cultivators before or after, he was the only one who was at mid-stage foundation establishment. Su Zimo sensed that something was amiss and felt that something was amiss. If the Dongling Valley trip was based on cultivation realms, it should be late-stage foundation establishment. Why would they bring a mid-stage foundation establishment disciple like him along? If it was based on potential and potential, why were all of them at late-stage or perfected foundation establishment apart from him? This arrangement was filled with contradictions. Look, those three are the three legacy disciples of the inner sect. Little Fatty exclaimed softly and pointed to the three people flying over on their swords not far away. The gray-robed cultivator on the left is Ji Ching Tian. It's said that he's at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment. Typically, a perfected foundation establishment cultivator would be referred to as a multi-meridian foundation establishment after unlocking several spirit meridians. The blue-robed cultivator on the right is Luo Yi, also at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment. The one in the middle is the leader of the 3 legacy disciples, Qin Yu. He's at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment and is the true number 1 of the inner sect. I even heard from my master that Qin Yu has a chance of unlocking his 6th spirit meridian before the sect competition. Typically speaking, the chances of forming a core after unlocking 4 spirit meridians were already very high. Furthermore, in the sect competition, even 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators had a chance of getting into the top 10. 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were definitely in the top 10. As for 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, it was already good enough if 1 or 2 of them appeared in the sect competition every 10 years. That alone was enough to show the value of Ethereal Foundation establishment, one of the 3 great secret skills of Misty Peak. At the very least, one could unlock 4 spirit meridians by cultivating Ethereal Foundation establishment. After that, it would depend on the cultivator's own potential, talent, comprehension and opportunities. For thousands of years, there had been disciples who had unlocked 6 spirit meridians in the sect. In Tianhuang mainland, even if a 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator cultivated to 100 years old, they might not be able to unlock their 7th spirit meridian. If they wanted to improve further, they could only enter the ancient battlefield. It was there that they had a chance of obtaining heaven-defying opportunities to unlock their 7th or even 8th spirit meridians. The reason why cultivators wanted to unlock as many spirit meridians as possible was not only to increase their strength, but also to prepare for their core formation. Naturally, the quality of a Jin Dan formed with 4 spirit meridians could not compare to a Jin Dan formed with 5 spirit meridians. A Jin Dan with 5 spirit meridians could not compare to a Jin Dan with 6 spirit meridians. It was said that once a Jin Dan's quality reached a certain level, one's spirit energy would resonate with the spirit energy of heaven and earth, resulting in a phenomenon that could shake the heavens and earth. That was the famous Jin Dan phenomenon of the cultivation world. Chapter 2:14. Since ancient times, there had been countless cultivators who formed their cores. However, none of them managed to cultivate a Jin Dan phenomenon. That was because everyone learned different things, had different experiences, had different understandings of core formation and unlocked spirit meridians. Due to the many different factors, there were many different types of Jin Dan phenomenons. The power of Jin Dan phenomenons varied as well. Some phenomenons were extremely powerful and could shake the world and cause tsunamis the moment they were released. However, the power of some anomalies was relatively weaker. It was said that there would definitely be phenomenons when all 8 meridians were unlocked. However, unlocking all 8 meridians was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Thousands of years ago, including the founding master of Misty Peak, there was only a single person who managed to unlock all 8 meridians. That person was the owner of the mystic gold silk armor, the terrifying expert who left behind the Void Thunder manual. Let's go up and greet them. It's not easy to meet these 3 senior brothers. Little Fatty pulled Su Zimo over and cupped his fists with a smile. Greetings, senior brothers. Qin Yu and the other 2 shifted their gazes and swept past Little Fatty swiftly. They paused for a moment on Su Zimo before turning to the side with cold expressions. Little Fatty smiled awkwardly. When Su Zimo saw how the 3 of them were acting, he dismissed the thought of greeting them as well. Some of the other perfected Foundation establishment, 1 Meridian and 2 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators looked at Su Zimo and the others with unfriendly gazes as well. "Ha, it's not their fault," Little Fatty explained, "there's a limit to the spirit energy in the spirit pool. If one more person absorbs it, it means that the cultivation speed of others will decrease. This trip to Dongling Valley had nothing to do with us to begin with. It's equivalent to us snatching other people's cultivation resources." Realization dawned on Su Zimo. Leng Ro shook her head. "The spirit pool belongs to the sect, not them. Furthermore, we're also disciples of the sect." "That's true, but others might not think that way," Little Fatty smiled bitterly. Not long after, a man in a purple robe with an arrogant expression flew over on his sword. Around him were many disciples of the sect. Feng Haoyu. One had to admit that Feng Haoyu's cultivation speed was indeed fast. He had already reached perfected Foundation establishment. Feng Haoyu's gaze turned, and when he saw Su Zimo, he actually walked over. "Junior brother Su, long time no see." Feng Haoyu came before Su Zimo and said with a faint smile. This was the first time the two of them were meeting ever since Feng Haoyu's crushing defeat to Su Zimo at Array Peak Spirit Arena. Su Zimo looked at Feng Haoyu calmly and silently. There was something strange about this. Feng Haoyu had stopped Su Zimo twice in private. His spirit sense told Su Zimo that Feng Haoyu wanted to kill him on both occasions. But now, Feng Haoyu actually pretended as if nothing had happened and ran over to greet him? With Feng Haoyu's vengeful nature, would he lower himself to do such a thing? There must be something fishy going on. Feng Haoyu smiled and asked, "Why? Is junior brother Su not even interested in talking to me?" Feng Haoyu was truly smiling, as though there was something that made him extremely happy. Enter Dongling Valley's spirit pool to cultivate? That might not be the case. Right then, 3 figures arrived together from not far away. The one in the middle was Spirit Peak's master, Wen Xian. Dressed in white robes, he flew through the air with an elegant expression. The other 2 were perfected Jin Dan and elders of the sect as well. Sweeping his gaze across the disciples below, Wen Xian nodded and waved his sleeves. A spirit vessel appeared and expanded with the wind in the blink of an eye. There was enough space on the spirit vessel that could carry hundreds of people. "Come on up." Wen Xian and the 2 sect elders were the first to board the spirit vessel and stood at the bow. Many sect disciples soared into the air on their swords and arrived on the spirit vessel with excited expressions. The cultivators who could stand on the spirit vessel were all acknowledged disciples of the sect and were enough to make others envious. The spirit vessel turned into a streak of light and tore through the air at an extremely fast speed. Su Zimo, Little Fatty and Ling Ro stood together and could feel the wind howling in their ears as the scenery flashed by rapidly. Su Zimo swept his gaze across the 2 sect elders and asked softly, "I wonder which one of them is Elder Chen." Little Fatty pointed to the one on the right. "The one in black robes is Elder Chen. The one on the left is Elder Yu." "Bro, what are you doing?" "Nothing." Su Zimo replied, "I heard that it's all thanks to Elder Chen's suggestion that we can enter the spirit pool to cultivate this time round." "Yes, I heard about that too." Little Fatty chuckled. "Elder Chen is a good person." Su Zimo smiled and did not reply. A moment later, Su Zimo felt increasingly uneasy. He had a nagging feeling that something was amiss but he could not figure it out. Su Zimo passed through the crowd and arrived at the front of the spirit vessel, bowing with cupped fists. Disciple Su Zimo greets Peak Master Wen Xian and the 2 elders. Wen Xian glanced sideways and nodded. The 2 sect elders turned back to look at Su Zimo with questioning expressions as well. "Seniors, I'm a little worried." "What?" Wen Xian's tone was cold and indifferent. Due to his relationship with Feng Haoyu, Wen Xian had always been prejudiced against Su Zimo. Su Zimo said, "Almost all the Foundation establishment core disciples of the sect are gathered for this trip to Dongling Valley. If they encounter any danger, it will be a huge blow to the sect. The sect will definitely not be able to fight for a spot in the 4 ranking lists in the sect competition 3 years later. As he spoke, Su Zimo had been paying attention to the expressions of Wen Xian and the other 2. When he heard that, Elder Yu could not help but laugh. You can head back. There's no need to worry about this. Wen Xian said coldly, do you know what it means to surround and kill our sect's foundation establishment core disciples? Which sect in the Great Zhou dynasty would have the guts to do so? Elder Yu smiled as well. Although the spirit pool of Dongling Valley opens once every 10 years, outsiders won't know the exact date. Although Elder Chen did not say anything, there was no change in his emotions and he was expressionless the entire time. Unable to tell anything, Su Zimo frowned and returned to his original spot. 6 hours later, a valley could be vaguely seen up ahead. We're here. Arriving above the valley, the spirit vessel descended slowly and many cultivators leaped off. There were 2 Jin Dan perfected beings guarding Dongling Valley. Including Wen Xian and the other 2, there were already 5 Jin Dan perfected beings guarding Misty Peak. In the middle of Dongling Valley, there was a spirit pool. The surface of the pool was sparkling, emitting a rich spirit energy. Even though they were hundreds of meters away, Su Zimo and the others could sense it clearly. This is truly a blessed land. Little Fatty let out an intoxicated expression and took a deep breath of air, praising. Fu. Feng Haoyu smiled and said meaningfully, everyone, enjoy yourselves. Right then, a pitch-black cloud appeared outside Dongling Valley, rumbling over at an extremely fast speed. There were even specks of scarlet light shimmering within the dark cloud in a sinister manner. The weather had changed. Chapter 2:15. Wen Xian's expression changed as he narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the black clouds. When Su Zimo saw the black clouds, he suddenly frowned and felt a sense of déjà vu. The black clouds moved extremely quickly and shone with a strange red light. Instead of looking like clouds, they resembled blood-eyed crows from the mine. The so-called black clouds were, in fact, a swarm of crows. The shimmering red lights were the eyes of the crows. Su Zimo recalled the battle outside Linfeng City and said in a deep voice, everyone, be careful. It's the group of people from the spirit mine outside Linfeng City. They're here for revenge? Fiend sects? Wen Xian narrowed his eyes with killing intent. Everyone from Misty Peak thought that the tragedy in Linfeng City was caused by someone from the fiend sections. However, Su Zimo found out from Demoness Ji that the fiend sects did not have such vicious methods and cultivation techniques. Su Zimo trusted Demoness Ji on this point. Although she seemed frivolous, she knew her limits and had the pride of the fiend sects in her bones. If it was done by someone from the fiend sects, she would definitely admit to it. Su Zimo looked at Little Fatty and Ling Ro and whispered, if you see that the situation isn't right later, run. What's wrong? Little Fatty was shocked. Ling Ro frowned slightly as well. Both of them had yet to realize the danger. To them, the sect had Wen Xian and the other 5 perfected Jin Dan cultivators here along with a group of top foundation establishment cultivators. Their strength was enough to destroy some small sects, why should they be afraid of others? Su Zimo did not say anything and swept his gaze across Elder Chen and Feng Haoyu before withdrawing a flying sword from his storage bag. It was the supreme-grade flying sword that Hakuya Dojin had refined for him. During this period of time, Su Zimo had spent most of his time researching tempering techniques, comprehending the candlelight sword formation and raising his cultivation realm. He had yet to refine weapons. Out of all the spirit weapons in his storage bag, this was the only supreme-grade flying sword. Soon, the dark clouds arrived above Dongling Valley. Countless blood-eyed crows circled the skies, blotting out the sun and emitting dense demonic chi. Every single one of them was no weaker than a foundation establishment cultivator. The skies suddenly darkened. Many of the Misty Peak disciples in the valley had ugly expressions on their faces. Fear flashed through the depths of their eyes. After all, such a scene was truly too shocking, and it caused one's hair to stand on end and shudder. The eyes of the crows shone with a blood-red light as they screeched continuously, glaring at the cultivators below as though they would swoop down at any moment and tear the Misty Peak disciples to shreds. Little Fatty's face was pale. He swallowed his saliva and said seriously, "The feathered beast this time is much stronger than the one we saw last time." At the entrance of Dongling Valley, a gigantic spirit vessel sped over and hundreds of cultivators jumped down from it. Among them, there were as many as 10 perfected Jin Dan. The rest were all Foundation Establishment cultivators with varying cultivation realms. However, their numbers were several times more than the Misty Peak disciples. Coupled with the swarm of blood-eyed crows above their heads, be it in terms of perfected Jin Dan or Foundation Establishment cultivators, Misty Peak was definitely disadvantaged. This was a situation of encirclement. There was no road to heaven, no door to hell. Among the hundreds of cultivators who alighted from the spirit vessel, the leader was a perfected Foundation Establishment cultivator. He wore blood-colored robes with a crow pattern on his sleeves. His face was pale and his lips were curled into a sinister smile. The 10 perfected Jin Dan surrounded him, protecting him in the middle. "Who are you?" Wen Xian glared at the blood-robed cultivator and asked coldly with a talisman in his left hand and a flying sword hovering before him. "Fu." The blood-robed cultivator chuckled and said leisurely, "Fellow Taoists, there's no need to be nervous. I have no ill intentions for this trip. Fellow Taoists, if you cooperate well, I'll bestow upon you a great opportunity." Pausing for a moment, the blood-robed cultivator changed the topic and said coldly, "However, if you don't know what's good for you, Fu, don't blame me for starting a massacre." Wen Xian's fingers moved and conjured hand seals. Spirit energy swirled around his fingertips as he prepared to attack. With a grim expression, Elder Yu stepped forward and shook his head, whispering, "Don't be rash. If we really fight, all of us disciples will die here. Let's check out his background first." Elder Yu raised his voice and asked, "Fellow Taoist, how should I address you? I'm more casual when it comes to this." The blood-robed cultivator smiled gently. "You can address me as young master or master. I won't force you since you like it." Elder Yu's expression turned terrible. Be it young master or master, it meant that he had to submit to this blood-robed cultivator. Elder Yu was a perfected being Jin Dan after all, there was no way he would agree to such a ridiculous request. "Junior, this place is less than 50 kilometers away from Misty Peak. If you use your spirit crane to send a message, it won't be long before experts of my sect rush over to provide reinforcements. Don't be too arrogant." Elder Yu said darkly. "Ha ha ha." The blood-robed cultivator roared in laughter. "Old dog, I'm giving you face but you don't want it. Firstly, with my blood crow army around, your spirit cranes won't be able to teleport out. Secondly, even if your spirit cranes are teleported out, you won't be able to last that long." Wen Xian harumphed coldly. "Elder Yu, there's no need to waste your breath on him. Since he's someone from the Fiend sects, everyone has the right to kill him. I'm not from the Fiend sections." The blood-robed cultivator sneered, "I'll give you guys one last chance. If all of you submit to me, I can spare your lives. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you without mercy." "Oh, right. There's someone called Su Zimo among you guys. Whether you submit to me or not, I'll suppress you personally and torture you to death bit by bit, he he he." A series of sinister laughter came from the blood-robed cultivator's mouth. "Submit?" Wen Xian laughed as well. "Ask the sword in my hand first." Right then, the blood-robed cultivator raised his head and said indifferently, "Aren't you going to attack?" Before his sentence was finished, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he hollered, "Everyone, disperse. There's a traitor in the sect." Wen Xian was the fastest to react and crushed the protection talisman in his left palm right away. Instantly, a light barrier rose and enveloped him. Clang! There was a crisp sound. Sparks flew everywhere. A flying sword struck Wen Xian's protective light barrier, causing it to tremble and almost collapse. It was clear how strong that sword was. It was just a hair's breadth away. If Wen Xian had been slightly slower, he would have been a dead man. In reality, the reason why Wen Xian reacted immediately was because of Su Zimo's question on the spirit vessel. At that time, Wen Xian did not pay much attention to it. However, when he saw that a powerful faction had truly arrived and set up such an encirclement, Wen Xian vaguely realized that there might be a traitor in the sect and was wary. Otherwise, there was no way news of them coming to Dongling Valley today would have been leaked. Of course, that was a vague guess and Wen Xian had yet to verify it. Right then, when the blood-robed cultivator said that and Su Zimo hollered, Wen Xian crushed his protection talisman without hesitation. Sensing the terror of the sword behind him, Wen Xian understood that he had just walked through the gates of hell and could not help but break out in cold sweat. Chapter 2:16. Elder Chen, Yu, one of the sect elders at the side, stared at Elder Chen who had attacked Wen Xian with widened eyes. Before he could react to the situation, he asked in confusion. However, the moment he said that, his expression changed and he finally realized what had happened. Someone had betrayed the sect. That person was none other than Elder Chen, who was hiding among them. A chill ran down his spine and he instinctively took a step back. He placed his hand on his storage pouch and took out a protective talisman. However, Elder Chen's reaction was faster. Unable to kill Wen Xian with a single strike, Elder Chen turned his flying sword around right away and conjured hand seals with his left hand, releasing a bedazzling light. Swash! The spirit art and flying sword descended at the same time. The elder's reaction was slightly slower, and before he could crush the protection talisman in his hands, his throat was sliced by a single sword. Blood flashed. A perfected Jin Dan fell from midair. His life force dissipated and his eyes were filled with indignance and rage. Traitor! Wen Xian hollered and his sleeves trembled in rage. A massive wave of spirit energy that was almost corporeal surged over like a tsunami with a frightening might. Amidst the huge tide, there was also a faint trace of sharp light that was difficult to detect. Hee hee. Elder Chen laughed strangely and turned to escape without hesitation after his successful attack, crushing his protection talisman right away. At the same time, he conjured hand seals and the spirit energy of a late-stage Jin Dan gathered together. Waving his hand, a bedazzling light burst forth and clouds rose. Boom! The bedazzling light and clouds collided with the tsunami and let out a deafening bang. Wen Xian's spirit energy tsunami was clearly superior to Elder Chen's bedazzling light. Poof! There was a crisp sound as though something had broken. Elder Chen's expression changed starkly as he exclaimed, a fresh wound had appeared on his arm. Unknowingly, his protective barrier was pierced through by a superior-grade flying sword that shone with spirit light. This high-grade flying sword was hidden in the tide of spiritual power, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. No one had noticed when it had appeared. Clang! On the opposite side, a middle-aged man in a black Taoist robe snorted coldly and took half a step forward. With a light tap of his finger, a flying sword flew out. While the sword was still in the air, four blazing rays of light burst out. For spirit patterns, a supreme-grade flying sword. The extreme-grade flying sword and Wen Xian's high-grade flying sword collided heavily, causing spiritual light to splatter in all directions. It was difficult to determine the winner. Elder Chen took the opportunity to escape. The entire process took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in the blink of an eye. Wen Xian narrowed his eyes and waved his hand gently, causing the superior-grade flying sword to return. This black-robed Taoist master Jin Dan had the same cultivation realm as him, which was also at the great circle of Jin Dan. Moreover, Wen Xian could feel a trace of pressure from this person. There were 10 Jin Dan spiritual masters on the other side, and the two black-robed cultivators standing beside the blood-robed youth were the strongest. Both of their eyes were flowing with a faint green light, which was extremely strange. One of them was Taoist Master Jin Dan, who had just attacked. The other one exuded a rich demonic qi. By the looks of it, he should be a spirit demon at the Jin Dan realm. After demons cultivated their inner cores, their skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow, organs and senses would undergo a metamorphosis once more. This metamorphosis would allow demons to be reborn, allowing them to take on human form and speak the human language. These two were the blood slaves of Blood Crow Palace's lord, Peng Yu and Yu Fei, who were here to protect the young master. Elder Chen managed to escape with his life and arrived beside the blood-robed cultivator. He glared at Wen Xian coldly and grit his teeth. As expected of Spirit Peak's master. You've already mastered level 3 of Ethereal Sword. Impressive, impressive. Ethereal Sword was one of the 3 great secret skills of Misty Peak and was split into 3 levels. Level 1, Afterimage. As the flying sword sped through the air, it would leave behind a series of afterimages in midair, making it difficult to differentiate between the real and the fake. It had the effect of confusing the enemy. Back when Feng Haoyu fought with Su Zimo, Feng Haoyu had cultivated to level 1, Afterimage. Level 2, Nothingness. Because the flying sword was too fast, its body was almost fused into the void and was faintly discernible. It was difficult to spot it with one's eyes. Level 3, Ethereal. Not only was the speed of the flying sword at its maximum and the sword's body was incorporeal, it was difficult to detect. Cultivators would also be able to control their sword-wielding techniques as they wished, reaching a level of mastery. The speed was extremely fast, the sword's body was incorporeal, its direction uncertain and its attacks ethereal. The third level was the hardest to cultivate. In Misty Peak, only perfected Jean Dan who had mastered level 3 of Ethereal Sword was qualified to become Spirit Peak's master. Furthermore, almost every single Spirit Peak's master was the strongest person in Misty Peak's Jean Dan realm. Just now, even though Elder Chen was protected by a protection talisman, he was still injured by Wen Xian's sword. If Peng Yu had not intervened, Elder Chen would have died on the spot with the second sword. Changing the topic, Elder Chen sneered, however, all of you are going to die here today. None of you are going to leave. You can try. Wen Xian was fearless as he stood in midair, shielding the many Misty Peak disciples. At that moment, Wen Xian, Elder Yu and another sect elder were the only perfected Jean Dan left on Misty Peak's side. However, there were as many as 11 perfected Jean Dan cultivators on the other side, including Elder Chen. Right then, something happened once more. Feng Haoyu who was in the crowd suddenly attacked. 3 spirit patterns shone on the sword, it was a superior grade flying sword. The flying sword streaked through the crowd and fresh blood gushed out. As one of the 3 legacy disciples, Luo Yi who was standing not far away from Feng Haoyu could not react in time at all. His huge head was tossed high into the air and his eyes were filled with shock. Even at the moment of his death, he did not realize what had happened. This sword was completely reaping human life. One after another, disciples fell into pools of blood and died with grievances. Many Misty Peak disciples were caught off guard. Even though Su Zimo had reminded them loudly earlier on, Elder Chen's betrayal and the death of an elder of the sect immediately after. Peak Master Wen Xian attacked and the clash between the perfected Jean Dan cultivators attracted everyone's attention. Su Zimo felt his scalp prickle as he grit his teeth. Killing intent surged in his heart and his eyes shone with endless coldness as an extremely terrifying aura emanated from his body. In reality, Su Zimo had already vaguely guessed that Elder Chen and Feng Haoyu were traitors. However, that was merely his speculation. Furthermore, Su Zimo did not know if there were anyone else who had betrayed the sect apart from the 2 of them. Therefore, Su Zimo's reminder was for everyone to disperse because there was a traitor in the sect. To think that his reminder would not be able to save his fellow sect members who had died. Those who died were the closest to Feng Haoyu. In other words, they were almost all Feng Haoyu's followers. But now, Feng Haoyu had slain them mercilessly without any hesitation and his eyes were filled with coldness and brutality. Feng Haoyu's initially handsome face looked extremely hideous and menacing right now. Among them, the one who suffered the greatest blow was Spirit Peak's Peak Master, Wen Xian. Feng Haoyu was almost viewed as a personal disciple by Wen Xian and was taught everything he knew in his lifetime. Even the superior grade flying sword in Feng Haoyu's hands was given to him by Wen Xian. One had to know that most Foundation establishment cultivators only possessed a middle-grade flying sword. Even as the peak master of Spirit Peak, Wen Xian's flying sword was merely superior grade. The fact that he gave a superior grade flying sword to Feng Haoyu was proof of how much he valued and loved the latter. But now, it was getting denser, clearer and more hurried. Where did the rain come from? Everyone turned towards the sound. Only to see that around Wen Xian, heavy rain suddenly started pouring down in torrents. The raindrops were long and thin like swords, emitting an incomparably sharp glint. Jin Dan phenomenon, ethereal sword rain. Against Wen Xian's Jin Dan phenomenon, the perfected Jin Dan of Blood Crow Palace could not retaliate at all and died on the spot. The reason why Wen Xian was able to maintain his composure despite the fact that there were 10 perfected Jin Dan opponents and even Elder Chen's betrayal was because he was at perfected Jin Dan and had even cultivated a Jin Dan phenomenon. Even if there were 10 perfected Jin Dan opponents, Wen Xian was confident that he could kill all of them here. That was the might of a Jin Dan phenomenon. But now, when Pengyu released a Jin Dan phenomenon as well, Wen Xian realized that something was amiss. To be precise, it was an extremely serious matter of life and death. As a Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei had a calm expression as he escorted the blood-robed youth to the ground. The blood-robed youth sneered and waved his hand. Split the battlefield. Pengyu, kill the remaining 2 Jin Dan perfected beings in the air as soon as possible. Leave the other Foundation establishment cultivators to us. Understood. In midair, Pengyu nodded in agreement. On the ground, the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace circled around Yu Fei and the blood-robed youth with a murderous aura and charged towards the disciples of Misty Peak. Don't linger on. Break out of the encirclement and inform the sect. When he saw that, Wen Xian hollered and gave the order decisively. At that moment, he and Elder Yu could not even protect themselves and could not provide support at all. In reality, the blood-robed youth's so-called splitting of the battlefield was for Pengyu and the other Jin Dan perfected beings to hold Wen Xian and the others in midair so that they could kill them. As for the Foundation establishment cultivators, they would fight on the ground. That way, be it the Jin Dan battlefield or the Foundation establishment battlefield, Blood Crow Palace would have complete control of the situation. Break out? The blood-robed youth reared his head in laughter. Stop dreaming. I have no intention of letting you guys leave this place alive today. None of you will be able to escape. Bang! 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 Right then, Pengyu's bone-corroding black wind and Wen Xian's ethereal sword rain collided with a loud bang. The two completely different phenomenons clashed in midair in a frightening manner. Both of their Jin Dan phenomenons were similar in strength and it was difficult to tell who was superior within a short period of time. Apart from Pengyu, Blood Crow Palace had 9 other perfected Jin Dan perfected beings. As for Wen Xian, Elder Yu was the only one left. Kill! Elder Chen hollered and took the initiative to attack mercilessly. Elder Yu grit his teeth and defended with all his might. However, he fell into a disadvantage instantly and was in grave danger time after time. He could lose his life at any moment. When he saw that, Wen Xian howled and channeled his Jin Dan furiously, injecting spirit energy into the phenomenon without any regard for his life. Swoosh! Waving his sleeves, Wen Xian swept up an endless sword rain that enveloped Elder Chen and the others. You must have a death wish. Pengyu harumphed coldly and a black wind howled over, almost forming a tornado that connected the heavens and the earth as it sucked in the falling sword rain. Poof! 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 The two phenomenons clashed once more and intertwined with one another in an increasingly intense manner. Wen Xian's face was pale and his body swayed. At that moment, it was equivalent to him fighting against 10 perfected Jin Dan perfected beings alone. Furthermore, one of the 10 perfected Jin Dan perfected beings possessed a Jin Dan phenomenon. He could not hold on for long. Chapter 218. On the ground, hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace had already swarmed over. Wen Xian and Elder Yu were trapped in midair and could not extricate themselves. Right now, the situation was clear: the disciples of Misty Peak only had a single path: escape. Furthermore, they did not have much time left. If Wen Xian and Elder Yu could not hold on, they would not only be facing hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators, but also perfected Jean Dan's pursuit. Hurry and leave. The leader of the legacy disciples, Qin Yu, hollered and turned to flee, not daring to linger. The other legacy disciple, Ji Qingtian, followed closely behind. Many Misty Peak disciples rode on their flying swords and fled in all directions, sprinting towards the exit of Dongling Valley. Bro, senior sister Leng, let's escape. Little Fatty called out with a nervous expression and sweating profusely. Leng Ro nodded. Both of them looked towards Su Zimo instinctively. At that moment, Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and exuded a cold killing intent. The supreme-grade flying sword hovered in his palm, quivering endlessly. Naturally, Su Zimo knew that the smartest thing to do right now was to escape as much as possible. However, he was indignant. You guys leave first. I'll go kill that man. Su Zimo waved his sleeves and the supreme-grade flying sword in his palm shone with 4 bedazzling spirit lights. With a swoosh, it tore through the air and pierced towards Feng Haoyu in the distance. Boom! At the same time, Su Zimo took a step forward with his left foot and stomped heavily on the ground. Exerting strength in his legs, he sprinted like a divine steed, leaving a series of afterimages behind him. Feng Haoyu felt an extremely sharpness piercing into his back. The air was being torn apart, emitting a strange sizzling sound. Frowning, Feng Haoyu adjusted his flying sword without hesitation and channeled Ethereal Sword's secret skill. Swoosh! The sword quivered gently and disappeared into the voids. Because it was too fast, the superior-grade flying sword was almost fused into the voids, turning transparent and difficult to detect. In terms of sword kinesis, Feng Haoyu was indeed far superior to Su Zimo. Clang! Feng Haoyu's flying sword was launched later but arrived first, actually intercepting Su Zimo's flying sword. Sparks flew everywhere. Supreme-grade flying sword. Feng Haoyu noticed the 4 spirit patterns on Su Zimo's flying sword and his gaze turned fervent with a hint of greed. Feng Haoyu, hand over your life. Su Zimo's voice resounded like a thunderclap, and his imposing aura and piercingly cold killing intent rumbled over while carrying an unparalleled aura. Feng Haoyu's expression changed drastically. Su Zimo, you dare! Feng Haoyu had not expected that. Not only did Su Zimo not choose to escape, he even dared to charge towards hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators. Su Zimo was naturally aware that in terms of sword-driving technique, he could not compare to Feng Haoyu. Even if he possessed a supreme-grade flying sword, he could at most fight to a draw with Feng Haoyu in a battle of flying swords. Therefore, Su Zimo bringing out the flying sword was only for the sake of attracting Feng Haoyu's attention. His true killing move was yet to come. Right now, the distance between Su Zimo and Feng Haoyu was less than 5 steps. Within 5 steps, even if Feng Haoyu was at perfected Foundation establishment, he would have to die here. Boom! Su Zimo punched in reverse and his right arm drew a gigantic arc in midair. Using his fist as a seal, he caused the air to explode with a deafening sound. Unable to dodge in time, Feng Haoyu crushed the protection talisman in his hands right away. A barrier of light rose. Bang! The gigantic seal smashed against the barrier of light with unparalleled ferocity. Snap! A Grade 2 protection talisman was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. Psst! Feng Haoyu gasped and his pupils constricted. Su Zimo's expression was cold and his eyes shone with a chilling killing intent as he strode forward and punched out once more. This punch directly sealed off all of Feng Haoyu's possible escape routes. Feng Haoyu spun around and with a whoosh, a pair of gigantic wings extended from his back in a sinister manner. That pair of wings was different from real wings and was condensed using a secret skill to channel spirit energy. That secret skill was the other great secret skill of Misty Peak, ethereal wings. Ethereal wings was considered as an auxiliary technique. It meant that Foundation establishment cultivators could soar into the air without the use of any external objects, just like perfected Jean Dan. Ethereal wings was much more agile than sword kinesis flight for cultivators. If used properly, it could provide a clear boost to a cultivator's overall strength. Given the current situation, even if Feng Haoyu were to turn and run on the ground, he would definitely not be able to escape Su Zimo's pursuit. If he were to use sword kinesis flight, he would have to summon his flying sword and would be slightly slower. The only way he could escape was to conjure ethereal wings. Swoosh! Flapping his wings, Feng Haoyu soared into the air and sped towards the skies. This change was completely out of Su Zimo's expectations. Seeing that his punch was about to miss, Su Zimo stomped on the ground and made use of the rebound force to leap up. Crackle! At the same time, Su Zimo's tendons and bones rang together. Suddenly, his right arm expanded by a foot and his fist turned into a palm, grabbing towards Feng Haoyu's back. Shing! Fresh blood filled the air. Ah! A tragic cry sounded from midair. Su Zimo tore off a huge chunk of flesh from Feng Haoyu's left leg, revealing the tendons and bones within in a shocking manner. If Feng Haoyu had reacted slightly slower, his heart would have been dug out. Su Zimo's figure descended. Feng Haoyu flapped his ethereal wings and was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. Escaping to the blood-robed youth's side, Feng Haoyu panted heavily and turned back with lingering fear. At that moment, the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace had already charged over with flying swords and spirit arts raining down. Not only was the blood-robed youth beside Feng Haoyu, there was also a Jean Dan realm spirit demon. It was no longer realistic for Su Zimo to rush over and kill Feng Haoyu. Gritting his teeth, Su Zimo retreated. Swoosh! The supreme-grade flying sword tore through the voids and returned to Su Zimo's side, slaying a Foundation establishment cultivator. Bang! A Foundation establishment cultivator had just charged over when his body exploded with a casual punch from Su Zimo. His flesh exploded and he died on the spot. Splash! Su Zimo channeled his bloodline and the terrifying sound of a tsunami could be heard from within his body, surging with a frightening aura. In the vast crowd, Su Zimo was like an ancient demon with a menacing aura. Poof! 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 Su Zimo strode forward with the plow heaven stride. The cultivators in front of him exploded on the spot as their flesh and blood splattered everywhere, leaving behind a ground filled with broken corpses and rivers of blood. Stepping on the corpses and rivers of blood, Su Zimo charged out of Dongling Valley like a god of death. Not far away, the blood-robed youth's gaze landed on Su Zimo and he exclaimed softly with a curious expression. What a strong bloodline! Interesting. Who is that? The blood-robed youth asked. Gulping, Feng Haoyu said in a deep voice, that's Su Zimo. He's the one who killed young master's blood slave outside Linfeng City. I've finally found him. The blood-robed youth smiled and said leisurely, it's truly a pity to kill someone with such a bloodline. I want him to become my blood slave and serve me as his master for the rest of his life. Chapter 219. Ah! 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 Not far away, tragic cries could be heard. The blood-eyed crows that were initially circling in the skies flapped their wings and charged down with demonic chi, surrounding the people of Misty Peak and biting them repeatedly. Every single one of the blood-eyed crows was a Foundation establishment spirit demon. This was an extremely terrifying power that could not be ignored. Any Misty Peak disciple that was left alone would be devoured by the blood-eyed crows in the blink of an eye, leaving only their bones behind. Before long, there were only a few dozen Misty Peak disciples left. Apart from Su Zimo, all the disciples that were left alone were dead. The two legacy disciples, Qin Yu and Ji Qingtian, had wretched expressions as they roared and commanded at the top of their lungs. With their efforts, they gathered the dozens of disciples and used their flying swords, spirit arts, and talismans to create a defensive barrier that temporarily blocked the blood-eyed crows outside. However, the difference in strength between the two sides was way too great. The blood-eyed crows were endless and covered the skies, charging at the defensive barrier formed by the Misty Peak disciples repeatedly. It was as though Qin Yu and the others were walking in a swamp, moving extremely slowly and sinking deeper. Before long, when Qin Yu and the others could no longer sustain their spirit qi or revealed any openings, the entire defensive barrier would shatter. The remaining dozens of people would also end up as food for the blood-eyed crows. This was a complete massacre. With Elder Chen and Feng Haoyu as spies, Blood Crow Palace had a clear understanding of the strength of the cultivators of Misty Peak and planned such a trap meticulously. Blood Crow Palace did not give the people of Misty Peak a chance at all. The blood-robed youth and the Jin Dan realm spirit demon behind him were still watching coldly from the sidelines and had yet to make a move. The moment the two of them made a move, the last hope of the people of Misty Peak would be extinguished as well. Today, apart from becoming the blood slaves of the blood-robed youth, none of the cultivators of Misty Peak would be able to leave this place alive. At that moment, the blood-robed youth looked at Su Zimo, who was killing in the crowd, and nodded repeatedly in satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. The blood-robed youth smiled. Only a cultivator as such is worthy of being my blood slave and fighting alongside me in the ancient battlefield. Young master, do you want me to capture this kid? The Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei, who was standing behind the blood-robed youth, lowered his head and asked with a cold expression. The blood-robed young man waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Let's wait and see. I'm curious about Su Zimo's limit and how long he can last." On the battlefield. Four perfected foundation establishment cultivators stood side by side, blocking Su Zimo's path. Boom! 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 A series of sounds came from the bodies of the four people, and spirit meridians appeared on the surface of their bodies, shining through their Taoist robes. Two were at one Meridian Foundation establishment, one was at 2 Meridian Foundation establishment, and the last one was at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment. It was absurd for a cultivator with a spirit meridian to target a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. But now, 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators stood out, and one of them was even at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment. The spirit energy of a cultivator with a single spirit meridian was far superior to Su Zimo, let alone a Foundation establishment cultivator with 3 meridians. In terms of strength, Su Zimo was definitely not a match for the four of them. The necks of the 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were pierced. Blood splattered. The 3 of them were terrified and clutched at their wounds with their hands. However, blood gushed out continuously and could not be stopped. The 3 of them felt their life force draining rapidly and their eyes dimmed. One had to know that this sword had not only pierced through the 3 men's throats, but the extremely sharp sword qi on the sword had also severed the 3 men's arteries. That was equivalent to severing their heads from their necks. Thump! The 3 of them fell to the ground one after another with widened eyes. Their bodies convulsed as blood flowed from beneath them, staining the ground red. Among the 4 of them, only the 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator managed to avoid the calamity. However, after that exchange, he was scared out of his wits and retreated to the side, looking at Su Zimo with a fearful gaze. If he had not experienced it personally, he would not have been able to imagine it. A mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was able to kill Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators with so many secret skills and killing moves. If such a person were to cultivate to the Foundation establishment Meridian opening realm, how terrifying would his battle prowess be? Chapter 220. Although the exchange between both parties seemed short, it was a clash of spirit arts, secret skills and psychological warfare. If it was a different battlefield and environment, Su Zimo might not have been able to win. Furthermore, after releasing the Fiend Suppression Seal, Su Zimo did not have much spirit energy left in his body. Right then, Su Zimo's scalp turned numb as a sense of danger surged in his heart. Su Zimo realized that he was targeted. Furthermore, that person was extremely strong and he could not resist at all. A Jin Dan realm expert. It could be the perfected Jin Dan that was fighting Wen Xian and Elder Yu in midair. It could also be the Jin Dan realm spirit demon beside the blood-robed youth. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and tried his best to compose himself. Breaking through the encirclement, he sped all the way and arrived outside Qin Yu's group. Caw! Caw! Many blood-eyed crows let out unpleasant cries when they caught the scent of fresh flesh. Hundreds of them lunged toward Su Zimo. Those blood-eyed crows were spirit demons with strong physiques and posed a great threat to Foundation establishment cultivators like Qin Yu. Qin Yu's group did not dare to let the blood-eyed crows get close to them. However, Su Zimo's physique was much stronger than those ordinary blood-eyed crows. No matter how many blood-eyed crows attacked him, they might not be able to hurt him. It was no exaggeration to say that although Su Zimo was a human, even the physique of ancient remnant beasts of the demon race could not compare to his. Compared to pure-blooded ferocious beasts, Su Zimo's physique and bloodline were superior as well. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he looked at the blood-eyed crows lunging over. The sound of tides rumbled from his body, accompanied by the roar of tigers and leopards and rumbling divine thunder. Splash! Rumble! Boom! Not only did such a strong bloodline not cause the blood-eyed crows to cower, they were even more ferocious and the blood glint in their eyes intensified. At that moment, Su Zimo was a delicious piece of nourishing flesh for the blood-eyed crows. The blood-eyed crows were merely ordinary demon beasts. How would they have the chance to devour the flesh of ancient remnant beasts and pure-blooded ferocious beasts? And the Su Zimo in front of him was a living, pure-blooded dire beast. As long as they could eat a piece of Su Zimo's flesh or drink a mouthful of Su Zimo's blood essence, their strength would increase significantly. Big brother! Little Fatty exclaimed when he saw this. However, this voice was cut apart by the countless blood-eyed crows and could not be transmitted out at all. Leng Rou's heart trembled, and her eyes dimmed. They were well aware of how terrifying the blood-eyed crows were. None of the lone cultivators would be able to survive from being torn apart and devoured by these beasts. So what if Su Zimo was strong in close combat? After all, he was only a human, so how could he resist so many blood-eyed crows? Little Fatty, Leng Rou, and the others could do nothing as they watched the blood-eyed crows swarm forward and drown Su Zimo's figure. Forget it. Leng Rou sighed internally and shook her head. They could not hold on much longer either. The resistance before them was nothing more than a momentary lapse of consciousness. Before long, they would end up in the same tragic state. Disheartened, Leng Rou turned her flying sword around and was prepared to commit suicide. She did not want to experience the process of being torn apart by the blood-eyed crows. She might as well kill herself. Right then, a strange sound came from the blood-eyed crows that surrounded Su Zimo not far away. Crackle! Endless lightning burst forth from Su Zimo's body in an incomparably bright manner. Snap! Thunder boomed. A gigantic bolt of lightning descended from the skies and connected with Su Zimo's body, not dissipating for a long time as though it was connected to heaven and earth. With Su Zimo as the center, a blinding lightning snake extended rapidly in all directions, surging wildly as though it was an ocean of lightning. The tide surged and engulfed all the blood-eyed crows around him. The power of lightning was one of the most terrifying types of energy. Furthermore, lightning was strong and yang in nature. It was the nemesis of evil beings like the blood-eyed crows. Engulfed by the ocean of lightning, many blood-eyed crows cried out tragically and fell from midair with smoke rising from their bodies. It was an extremely shocking scene. Be it the cultivators of Blood Crow Palace or the disciples of Misty Peak, all of them were dumbfounded with disbelief in their eyes. Lightning descended from the depths of the 9 heavens and descended upon Su Zimo's body. Su Zimo stood in the center of the ocean of lightning motionlessly like a divine being that was being baptized by lightning, looking down on the world and cleansing it of all evil. This was the wrath of lightning. Good, good, Good. The blood-robed youth was the first to react as his eyes lit up. Instead of being angry, he laughed and nodded repeatedly without concealing the admiration in his eyes. However, there was a hint of fear and even jealousy in his eyes. Although he had learned the 3 secret skills of the sect, he did not know about this thunder art. The Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei, had a calm expression with a cold gaze. No matter what method Su Zimo had, it did not affect the current situation at all. The Jin Dan realm and Foundation Establishment realm were 2 completely different cultivation realms that could not be crossed at all. As long as he made a move, Su Zimo would not be able to resist at all. Good. A series of cheers broke out from the Misty Peak crowd. After Su Zimo's attack, the number of blood-eyed crows decreased rapidly and the pressure on Qin Yu and the others was greatly reduced. Su Zimo, I'll give you a chance to live. Become my blood slave. Right then, the blood-robed youth walked towards Su Zimo in an unhurried manner. Although his tone was calm, there was an unquestionable power in it. Su Zimo turned around and his gaze paused momentarily on the blood-robed youth. The current situation was a sure-kill situation for everyone from Misty Peak. However, right then, Su Zimo vaguely sensed a chance of survival in this sure-kill situation. The blood-robed youth had an extremely high status and the Jin Dan realm spirit demon was by his side the entire time, guarding him like a shadow. If he could lure the blood-robed youth away, the Jin Dan realm spirit demon would definitely leave as well. That way, the greatest threat to everyone from Misty Peak would be gone. Although there were still many blood-eyed crows and Foundation Establishment cultivators left on the battlefield, the Misty Peak disciples might have a chance of escaping since both sides were at Foundation Establishment realm. This was the only chance for everyone from Misty Peak. Although it was small, it was worth a shot. You think you have what it takes? Su Zimo looked at the blood-robed youth and scoffed coldly. Suddenly, he turned and sped out of Dongling Valley. Su Zimo exuded a powerful bloodline aura and his departure attracted a large group of blood-eyed crows. Su Zimo was extremely fast. Even perfected Foundation Establishment cultivators would not be able to catch up to him when he sped at full speed with divine steed fleeting. You're trying to escape. The blood-robed youth narrowed his gaze and withdrew a white bone staff from his storage bag. Leaping up, he stood on it and released spirit energy from his body. The light of spirit meridians flashed repeatedly on the blood-robed youth's body. 1, 2, 3. 4 spirit meridians. The blood-robed youth was at 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment. Chapter 221. Once a 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator released his spirit energy, the speed of sword kinesis flight was rather shocking. The wind howled in his ears as the blood-robed youth stepped on his white bone staff and chased after Su Zimo who was sprinting in the distance. After more than 10 breaths, the blood-robed youth was shocked to discover that even with his terrifying speed, he could not catch up to Su Zimo who was sprinting on the ground. Even if he used his full strength, it was to no avail. At the very most, he could only ensure that Su Zimo would not shake him off. That man's physique is so strong that he possesses such explosive speed. The blood-robed youth already had a high opinion of Su Zimo. But now, he realized that he had still underestimated this man. Right then, Yu Fei's voice sounded, "That lad's bloodline is strong and he has already cultivated to the legendary Tsunami blood realm. His physique and bloodline are definitely not weaker than ancient remnant beasts. In fact, he might even be comparable to pure-blooded ferocious beasts." As a Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei was naturally discerning. At that moment, he soared into the air with his hands behind his back and followed closely behind the blood-robed youth with a relaxed expression. "Yu Fei, bring me to catch up to him." The blood-robed youth was indignant that he could not catch up to Su Zimo. His expression darkened and his voice was cold. "All right." Yu Fei replied casually. In midair, Yu Fei's figure changed continuously. His body contorted, compressed in some places and twisted in others. His tendons and bones sounded like beans being fried. In the blink of an eye, Yu Fei had transformed into a gigantic blood-eyed crow. The blood-robed youth understood and leaped onto the blood crow that Yu Fei had transformed into. Although he was carrying a person, Yu Fei's speed increased exponentially and he almost turned into a streak of light. So fast? Su Zimo turned back and was secretly shocked. The speed of a Jin Dan realm spirit demon was much faster than Su Zimo. Yu Fei arrived first with the blood-robed youth and arrived before Su Zimo before long, blocking his path. Yu Fei's body shook, and he returned to his human form. He followed behind the blood-robed youth with an indifferent expression. You can't escape. Looking at Su Zimo, who showed no signs of slowing down, the blood-robed youth sneered. He waved the white bone staff in his left hand and chanted a mysterious incantation. As the blood-robed youth chanted, 5 pitch-black skulls suddenly flew out of the white bone staff in his hand. They split into 5 different directions and charged toward Su Zimo. Ah! Ah! Before they even got close, the eyes of the 5 skulls suddenly emitted 2 blood-red rays of light, and a series of strange and eerie cries came from their mouths. Seeing this scene, Su Zimo's heart trembled. This method seemed to have exceeded the scope of spirit arts. The 5 skulls were emitting an evil aura that made one's hair stand on end. It was unknown just how much blood it had been stained with and how many lives it had devoured to be able to refine such an evil thing. Su Zimo quickly calmed his mind. His eyes were cold, and his expression did not change. The situation before him was clear: even if he retreated, he would not be able to escape death. If he chose to take them head-on, he might have a chance of taking one of them down with him. In the blink of an eye, the 5 skulls descended on Su Zimo's body, opening their mouths and biting down viciously. Boom! There was a deafening sound as the sound of tsunami and thunder echoed from Su Zimo's body. Incomparably blazing lightning shone on Su Zimo's body with a terrifying might. The pitch-black skulls were only slightly obstructed by the power of thunder and their evil aura was reduced slightly. Breaking through the lightning barrier, they bit down on Su Zimo's flesh. How strong was Su Zimo's flesh? Even a middle-grade flying sword would not be able to hurt his flesh after circulating the mental cultivation technique of flesh petrification. But now, the 5 skulls bit through Su Zimo's skin instantly. The skulls sucked continuously and devoured Su Zimo's essence blood. The red glint in their eyes intensified and they looked excited, as though they were alive. If you want to eat, I'll let you eat your fill. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly hollered and no longer suppressed the demonic chi in his body. Mixed with his surging bloodline, it burst forth. That was the power of blood chi. It was much stronger than the power of blood chi alone. At that moment, demonic chi coiled around Su Zimo's body and his bloodline surged. His body expanded and his eyes shone with endless coldness. It was as though he was possessed by an ancient demon with a murderous aura. Most cultivators could sense the appearance of demonic chi. However, at that moment, Su Zimo was already far away from the battlefield and was almost at the edge of Dongling Valley. At that distance, the cultivators trapped in the battlefield could not sense the demonic chi on Su Zimo's body at all. Furthermore, they did not have the mind and energy to do so. However, the blood-robed young man opposite Su Zimo was shocked and his expression changed. Su Zimo was way too close to him. At that distance, Su Zimo was almost like an undefeatable god. The skulls that were initially devouring Su Zimo's essence blood were suddenly destroyed by a terrifying power of blood chi. The situation changed instantly. Initially, Su Zimo was at a disadvantage and could be taken in as a blood slave at any moment. Now, both sides were in a different situation. The blood-robed young man's life was hanging by a thread. Boom! Su Zimo's gaze was sharp as a knife. He hollered and strode forward, causing the ground to shake violently. Hand over your life. Su Zimo reached out with both arms and grabbed the blood-robed young man who was still retreating with a pale face. He wanted to use the ultimate killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, divine steed dismemberment. If he managed to grab hold of the blood-robed young man, he would definitely not be able to escape the fate of being dismembered. In Su Zimo's opinion, as long as he could drag the blood-robed young man down with him before his death, he would have profited greatly. Just as the blood-robed young man was about to be killed by Su Zimo, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was the Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei. Yu Fei was extremely surprised to see Su Zimo release demonic qi. However, his reaction was fast. Before Su Zimo could do anything, he stood in front of the blood-robed young man and saved the latter from death's door. Piak! Piak! Yu Fei scoffed coldly with a hint of mockery in his eyes. He reached out and grabbed Su Zimo's wrists instantly. At the same time, Yu Fei's chest emitted an even stronger aura that suppressed Su Zimo's blood qi. Inner core. That was the inner core. Su Zimo's wrists were gripped by Yu Fei and he felt weak all over as his eyes dimmed. What a pity. He was one step behind. If he had a single more breath, the blood-robed young man would definitely be dead. Once Su Zimo released his power of blood qi, he was confident that he could kill even a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Su Zimo, you are indeed strong. Yu Fei said coldly, however, with me around today, you won't be able to hurt a single hair on the young master. This time round, the palace lord had specially instructed Yu Fei and Peng Yu to protect the young master. If anything were to happen to the young master, the two of them would definitely die. Chapter 222. Ah! Su Zimo reared his head and howled into the skies. His eyes widened and his black hair danced without wind as his blood qi surged. Boom! 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 Su Zimo's bloodline rumbled as lightning flashed and demonic qi coiled around him. His tendons and bones trembled, he was already pushing his strength to its limits. Even so, Yu Fei who was standing opposite him was still expressionless as he gripped Su Zimo's wrists tightly without budging at all. This was a complete suppression in terms of strength and cultivation realm. There was no technique to speak of. The reason why Jin Dan phenomenons were created was because of the high quality of Jin Dan and its pure spirit energy. It could resonate with the spirit energy of heaven and earth and create phenomenons from there. Demons did not have spirit energy in their bodies and naturally did not have Jin Dan phenomenons. However, the inner core of demons was formed from the essence of their skin, flesh, tendons, marrow and organs. It was the source of their strength. After forming an inner core, a demon's skin, flesh, bloodline, bones and organs would transform completely and their strength would increase exponentially. That strength was enough to crush all Foundation establishment spirit demons. Yu Fei looked at Su Zimo who was still struggling and raised his chin in a condescending manner. His lips curled and his gaze was cold. Fu. The blood-robed youth walked over slowly as well, sneering coldly with a mocking look in his eyes. In his eyes, Su Zimo was like a mouse that had fallen into the hands of a cat, struggling endlessly to no avail. I told you, you won't be able to escape today. The blood-robed youth stood before Su Zimo as well and said coldly with a bright gaze, "Be my blood slave obediently." Waving the pure white bone staff in his hands, the blood-robed youth chanted an obscure incantation. In the void, a strange power began to fill the air. The blood-robed youth's eyes shone with a dark green glow that was mysterious and sinister. When Su Zimo's gaze met with his, he felt a wave of dizziness. Not good. In an instant, Su Zimo lost his mind. It was as if he had fallen into a boundless darkness, sinking deeper and deeper, unable to extricate himself. An extremely evil power began to invade Su Zimo's mind. Su Zimo's eyes glowed with a faint green light. Ah! Su Zimo roared in his heart. His voice was hoarse, but he was still unable to break free from this mental control. No one can control me. Su Zimo lowered his head, his entire body trembling violently. The veins on his neck were exposed, and the blood vessels on his face were clearly visible. He was in incomparable pain, but he still did not give up. The blood-robed young man's technique was an extremely powerful and strange secret skill called the blood slave technique. Once a cultivator was corroded by the power of the blood slave art and fell into a spiritual illusion, it would be very difficult for them to break free with their own strength. Therefore, the casting of the blood slave spell could not be interrupted or affected by external forces. In the eyes of the blood-robed young man, the current situation was extremely suitable for him to cast the blood slave technique. Su Zimo was controlled tightly by Yu Fei and could not move at all. The three of them were far away from the battlefield and nobody could interrupt the entire casting process. The blood-robed young man could almost imagine Su Zimo kneeling before him with a respectful and pious expression as a blood slave. However, be it the blood-robed young man or Yu Fei, they had missed out on something. That was the only variable. That variable did not only affect the fates of Su Zimo, the blood-robed young man and Yu Fei, it also affected the Battle of Dongling Valley. Perhaps, no one here would have expected that the impact of that variable was not limited to that. From this day forth, the impact would continue and even stir the entire Tianhuang mainland with raging waves. At the edge of Dongling Valley, Su Zimo extended his arms and stood on the spot, trembling non-stop with a pained expression. His arms were gripped tightly by two pairs of hands. Opposite him was the Jin Dan realm spirit demon, Yu Fei. Beside Yu Fei was the blood-robed young man. Su Zimo's head was lowered and his black hair drooped down. Right then, Su Zimo suddenly felt a strange movement in his chest. A small beast was hiding in the slightly open chest area, looking at Su Zimo, who was in agony. Its round and black eyes shone like the stars in the sky, deep and mysterious. Initially, Su Zimo was still in the mental illusion and his surroundings were pitch black. All of a sudden, an external force barged in and tore open a gap in the darkness. The next moment, Su Zimo caught sight of a little beast. This little beast was like a puppy. It blinked a pair of pitch-black eyes that were sparkling and translucent as it tilted its head to look at him. "Night Spirit," Su Zimo murmured softly. When he met the little beast's gaze, Su Zimo shuddered and broke free from the mental illusion. The Night Spirit's gaze seemed to contain a mysterious power that could dispel the evil power in Su Zimo's body. Although he broke free from the illusion, Su Zimo was drenched in sweat and almost exhausted. "Hurry and escape." Su Zimo's lips trembled and he said with a hoarse voice. Although the Night Spirit had a mysterious background and helped him break free from the mental illusion, the Night Spirit was still too young. It had not even been a month since the Night Spirit was born. What could a 1-month-old baby do? Even a 1-month-old pure-blooded ferocious beast would be pitifully frail with tender flesh and immature bones, let alone a human baby. Of course, although the Night Spirit was young, it was intelligent and had already gained sentience. Su Zimo knew that the Night Spirit could understand his words and the situation before it. His fate was sealed. If he were to fall into the hands of a Jin Dan realm spirit demon, he would not be able to escape even if he had wings. However, the Night Spirit was different. It looked like a weak puppy. Be it the blood-robed youth or Yu Fei, neither of them would take it seriously and it had a high chance of escaping. When it heard Su Zimo's words, the Night Spirit's expression was calm and it did not move at all. The Night Spirit was still hiding in Su Zimo's embrace and did not expose itself. It merely listened attentively, as though it was paying attention to the movements outside. Ugh! Almost at the same time as Su Zimo broke free from the mental illusion, a dull grunt sounded from the other side. The blood-robed youth hugged his head with both hands in extreme pain. His dark green eyes were bloodshot and his facial features were contorted, looking terrifying. If the blood slave art was disrupted by an external force, it would not affect the caster much. However, this time round, the blood-robed youth's blood slave art was repelled by another mysterious force. The failure of the technique coupled with the backlash caused the blood-robed youth to feel as though he was struck by lightning. His head hurt so badly that he almost fainted. Yu Fei frowned. His hands were still gripping Su Zimo's arm as he turned to the blood-robed youth and asked in concern, "Young master, what's wrong?" Right then, Su Zimo's chest moved. A black shadow darted out and followed Su Zimo's arm to Yu Fei's arm in a couple of steps. Like a phantom, the black shadow was extremely fast and arrived before Yu Fei's chest in the blink of an eye. The black shadow paused for a moment and suddenly raised its palm. 5 extremely sharp claws reached out and shone with a cold glint. It was as though there was a stench of death and blood as it grabbed towards Yu Fei's throat. Chapter 223. At the same time, the blood-robed youth endured the pain in his head and grit his teeth. Watch out, Su Zimo has something else on him. However, it was already too late by the time he said that. The moment Night Spirit made its move, Yu Fei sensed something as well and instinctively turned around to look in that direction. The next moment, Yu Fei's pupils constricted and his heart stopped beating. Exclamation point. Blood flashed and Yu Fei's Adam's apple was ripped apart by Night Spirit with a huge chunk of flesh. Blood spewed out and splattered all over Su Zimo's body. It had to be said that Night Spirit's timing was perfect. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. In that short moment, Night Spirit displayed a sharp sense and precise grasp of timing in battle. However, that was an ability that no one imparted to it. This was completely an instinct. Killing instinct. When he saw that, Su Zimo was stunned. The blood-robed youth's mind went blank and he was stunned as well. That claw was way too ruthless. Even if Yu Fei was a Jin Dan realm spirit demon, he would not be able to survive such a severe injury. Yu Fei's eyes widened and a ball of black light burst forth from his chest with a divine glow. He threw a backhand punch towards Night Spirit's head. It was a final struggle of a Jin Dan realm spirit demon. Although the entire process seemed long, it happened in a split second. Yu Fei's reaction was extremely fast. Right after his throat was ripped apart by Night Spirit's claw, the first thing he did was to strike and kill Night Spirit on the spot. His main artery was severed and his blood chi was severely drained. Yu Fei had already realized that he was definitely going to die. However, he had to kill Night Spirit before he died. Against Yu Fei's incoming punch, Night Spirit leaped and tilted its head, dodging to the side with all its might. Bang! Even so, Yu Fei's fist still landed heavily on Night Spirit's waist. Kia! Night Spirit cried out in pain as a large part of his abdomen caved in. His entire body was like a kite with its string cut. He was sent flying back by the punch and fell back into Su Zimo's arms. Night Spirit's eyes were closed as he coughed up blood. He had already fainted. Seeing this scene, Su Zimo felt his heart ache. The Night Spirit, who was not even a month old, was much weaker than a Jin Dan realm spirit demon. It was like a baby holding a dagger in his hand. Although he had the power to kill an adult, he was far from being a match for the adult. In truth, if Yu Fei hadn't been heavily injured and lost a large amount of blood and chi, his strength would have been greatly reduced. Just now, this punch could very well blow up Night Spirit's body. This punch seemed to have exhausted the last of Yu Fei's life force. Young master, hurry, leave. Yu Fei's face was pale and his throat was broken. He could not speak clearly and stuttered, but he was still trying his best to speak. The moment he said those 4 words, Yu Fei fell to the ground with a thud. His eyes were lifeless and the blood from his throat stained the ground beneath him. Su Zimo stuffed Night Spirit back into his robes and looked at the blood-robed youth opposite him with a cold, murderous gaze. At that moment, Su Zimo was not in a good state. With the help of Night Spirit, he managed to break free from the mental control of the blood slave art. However, he had expended a huge amount of energy during this period of time and was physically and mentally exhausted. It was comparable to fighting a top expert. The blood-robed youth was not in a good state either. The interruption of the blood slave art and the backlash caused the blood-robed youth's mind to be in a daze. Both of them were in terrible states and it was unknown who would emerge victorious if they were to fight. However, when he saw Yu Fei's death and heard his dying words, the blood-robed youth already had thoughts of retreating. Moreover, what kind of person was he? He was the young lord of Blood Crow Palace and had an incomparably noble status. Why should he fight to the death with this Foundation establishment cultivator before him? As long as he avoided this person for the time being and waited for perfected Jean Dan to arrive from the battlefield, this lad would definitely die. At that thought, the blood-robed youth made up his mind. Retreat. Right then, Su Zimo's gaze looked over. It was as sharp as a sword, as though it could shred him into pieces. That was not the gaze of a human at all. It was more like a famished ancient ferocious beast, ferocious, violent and bloodthirsty. The blood-robed youth's heart skipped a beat and he retreated half a step back instinctively. Boom! That half a step caused Su Zimo's aura to increase tremendously. Under the guidance of his aura, Su Zimo executed the plow heaven stride and charged forward. Bursting with the power of blood chi, he threw a punch that transformed into a gigantic seal that descended from the skies. Su Zimo's eyes were cold and he had no intention of holding back. Earlier on, he was nearly controlled by the blood-robed youth and became the latter's blood slave. Knight's spirit was severely injured and his fate was unknown. More than half of the most elite disciples of Misty Peak's Foundation establishment realm were dead. 2 elders of the sect were dead as well. All of these blood debts had to be repaid with the life of the blood-robed youth before him. Save me! The blood-robed youth was shocked and shrieked. Reaching into his storage bag, he withdrew a white bone shield. Injecting spirit energy, the white bone shield expanded instantly and the blood-robed youth tossed it over his head hurriedly. The blood-robed youth's courage was already weak and he did not dare to attack at all. He could only defend passively. In his opinion, as long as he could last 10 rounds, perfected Jean Dan would definitely arrive from the battlefield not far away to provide reinforcements. They would save him and kill Su Zimo at the same time. On the battlefield of Jean Dan, the 10 perfected Jean Dan cultivators of Blood Crow Palace, led by Peng Yu, surrounded Wen Xian and Elder Yu and attacked. They had complete control of the situation. If not for Wen Xian's Jean Dan phenomenon, the 2 of them would have died a long time ago. However, releasing the Jean Dan phenomenon consumed a lot of spirit energy. Wen Xian could not hold on for long. Peng Yu's expression changed when he heard Wen Xian's cry for help. Hurry and reinforce the young master. Nothing must happen to him. Peng Yu pointed at the 2 perfected Jean Dan cultivators and shouted. The 2 perfected Jean Dan cultivators retreated hurriedly and soared into the air, speeding in the direction of the blood-robed youth. The development of the situation was as the blood-robed youth had expected. Indeed, perfected Jean Dan cultivators arrived after his cry for help. However, the blood-robed youth was wrong about something. Bang! Su Zimo's fist landed on the white bone shield with a deafening sound. The bone shield trembled violently and cracks appeared on it as its light dimmed. The white bone shield was destroyed by a single punch from Su Zimo. Psst! The blood-robed youth's expression changed starkly as he gasped. Immediately after, Su Zimo's figure flashed and arrived before the blood-robed youth. Su Zimo's eyes shone coldly as he reached out and grabbed the blood-robed youth's arms, ripping them apart. At the same time, he bent his knees and charged forward like a divine steed. Divine steed dismemberment. Shing! A blood mist filled the air. Ah! Accompanied by the blood-robed youth's tragic cry, Su Zimo ripped his arms off forcefully. After divine steed dismemberment, it was divine steed trample. Su Zimo bent his knee and struck the blood-robed youth's chest, making use of the momentum to leap. Stomping twice on the blood-robed youth's head, Su Zimo's figure had already passed the blood-robed youth without any sluggishness. The 2 killing moves were seamless and could be said to be perfect. The moment Su Zimo landed, the blood-robed youth collapsed on his back as well. His chest was caved in and his throat was shattered. His face was a bloody mess. He was already dead after being trampled beyond recognition. The blood-robed youth was wrong about one thing. Su Zimo didn't even need 10 rounds to kill him, but 3. Chapter 224. The moment the blood-robed youth died, an extremely terrifying aura burst forth from Black Crow Mountain that was hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, as though the apocalypse had arrived. Every single living being on Black Crow Mountain was scared out of their wits as they sprawled on the ground motionlessly. "Who is it? Who is it? How dare you kill my disciple?" In the depths of Black Crow Mountain, a deep and sinister roar sounded from a gigantic palace that was filled with endless killing intent and rage. "I'm going to tear you into pieces and grind your bones to dust." Boom! Accompanied by a deafening explosion, the entire palace shook violently as the blood mist in the surroundings turned thicker, almost materializing. The entire palace seemed to be floating in the blood sea, faintly discernible. A figure charged out from the palace and suddenly opened his mouth, sucking in a deep breath. Splash! The blood sea surged, forming a gigantic vortex as seawater surged endlessly into the figure's open mouth. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding blood sea vanished. A middle-aged man stood in midair. His black hair draped over his shoulders and his face was thin. Wearing a dark red robe, his eyes were dark green and shone with a sinister glint. Caw! Caw! Suddenly, an ear-piercing cry sounded from Black Crow Mountain. Initially, the cry was far away in the horizon. However, in the blink of an eye, it had already arrived. A gigantic, pitch-black crow with bloodshot eyes flapped its wings and streaked across the skies above Black Crow Mountain, speeding over. This was the king of the many blood-eyed crows in Black Crow Mountain. The Blood Crow King. When the palace lord first arrived at Black Crow Mountain, this crow was the first one he subdued. The crow had obtained quite a bit of benefits from following the palace lord, and its current cultivation was already equivalent to the peak of nascent soul realm. Master! The Blood Crow King arrived above the palace and suddenly descended. By the time he landed on the ground, he had already transformed into a black-robed cultivator who knelt on the ground with a respectful expression. "Come, follow me for a spin." The palace lord's gaze was cold as he said coldly, "I want to see who dares to touch my disciple. I want him to pay with his blood, Dongling Valley." The blood-robed youth was dead, lying in a pool of blood. The 3 rounds had only lasted for a few breaths of time. The time was too short. The 2 perfected Gene Dan cultivators who had come to provide support had yet to arrive. They were too far away to save the blood-robed youth. Seeing this, the 2 Gene Dan perfected masters were dumbfounded. The 2 of them seemed to have thought of something terrifying. Their faces suddenly became incomparably pale and extremely unsightly. Their bodies faintly trembled. The blood-robed youth was the only true disciple of the Blood Crow Palace Lord. They had escorted the blood-robed youth to Dongling Valley. Now that the blood-robed youth had died tragically here, there was a high chance that Blood Crow Palace's lord would target them first in his rage. Their only chance of survival was the green-robed cultivator not far away. Only by capturing this person alive and escorting him to the palace lord of Blood Crow Palace would they have any hope of survival. Whoosh! Whoosh! Their eyes were red, and their faces were full of murderous intent. The spiritual power in their dantian was crazily circulating, and their speed was pushed to the limit as they rushed toward Su Zimo. On the other side, Su Zimo had expended almost all of his remaining stamina after killing the blood-robed youth in 3 moves and was panting heavily. Be it the connection, strength or timing of those 3 moves, he was already at the limit of what he could unleash. In a head-on clash, he managed to kill a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator in a one-on-one fight. Even if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he might not be able to achieve such results. If not for the fact that he had attained lesser mastery of the organ's refinement section and released a strong power of blood chi, coupled with the blood-robed youth's weakness, the outcome of this battle would have been hard to predict. After killing the blood-robed youth, Su Zimo turned back to look at the 2 Gene Dan perfected masters not far away with a mocking look in his eyes. Swoosh! Su Zimo's sleeves trembled and a supreme-grade flying sword shot out. Shing! Using the flying sword, Su Zimo first cut open Yu Fei's chest and retrieved the demon beast inner core within. At the same time, he grabbed their storage bags and tossed them into his own. Thereafter, his sword sped forward and sliced off the blood-robed youth's head. "He's already dead and his head is with me. Come and get it if you want, ha 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 ha." Gripping the blood-robed youth's head in his hands, Su Zimo reared his head and laughed maniacally. His voice was loud and clear, spreading in all directions. Because Su Zimo was standing rather far away, he was already close to the edge of Dongling Valley. Coupled with the fact that he killed the blood-robed youth in 3 moves, it was so fast that apart from the 2 Jin Dan perfected masters who were rushing over, no one else noticed it. But now, Su Zimo's voice reverberated through Dongling Valley and everyone heard it loud and clear. There was a momentary pause in the fight between the cultivators on both sides. Be it the cultivators of Blood Crow Palace or the Misty Peak disciples, all of them glanced in Su Zimo's direction instinctively. Immediately after, everyone's expressions changed starkly. However, the Misty Peak disciples revealed looks of joy. As for the Blood Crow Palace cultivators, their faces were pale as though they had lost their parents. "Capture that man alive! Don't let him escape!" Peng Yu roared. There were only 8 perfected masters of Jin Dan of Blood Crow Palace who were initially surrounding Wen Xian and Elder Yu. Now that they heard Peng Yu's roar, another 2 Jin Dan perfected masters left the battlefield and sprinted in the direction of Su Zimo with a thunderous might. Poof! 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 The pressure on Wen Xian decreased and he took advantage of the distraction of one of the Jin Dan perfected masters to release the power of phenomenon. Numerous fine raindrops fell on this person's body, instantly piercing countless bloody holes in his body, causing him to be riddled with holes. That person's eyes dimmed as he fell from midair. Peng Yu grit his teeth. Initially, he wanted to capture Su Zimo personally. But now, he could only stay where he was. Swallowing a huge mouthful of elixirs, Peng Yu circulated his spirit energy furiously and unleashed a torrential attack. He wanted to kill Wen Xian and Elder Yu as soon as possible. In the skies, the blood-eyed crows that were initially surrounding the remaining 40-odd Misty Peak disciples were now charging towards Su Zimo with bloodshot eyes. More than half of the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace had also moved away. With that, the pressure on everyone from Misty Peak decreased significantly. Suddenly, everyone saw a glimmer of hope, a ray of hope. Due to the death of the blood-robed youth, the entire situation changed slightly. The battlefield was in chaos. No matter what, Qin Yu and Ji Qingtian were both legacy disciples of Misty Peak. One was at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment while the other was at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment. They were extremely strong. As long as they could make use of this opportunity to kill their way out of Dongling Valley and send a message to the sect, they would have a chance of survival. On the other side, 4 Jin Dan perfected masters had already charged towards Su Zimo. The blood-eyed crows in the skies charged over together with most of the Foundation establishment cultivators on the ground. Such a vast and mighty army had practically formed a raging wave that was surging over. In the face of that wave, Su Zimo seemed incomparably insignificant and was almost drowned by the dense crowd and blood-eyed crows. It was easy to imagine what would happen to him. Chapter 225. Qin Yu turned to look in Su Zimo's direction with a conflicted gaze and clenched his fists. "Bro!" Little Fatty could not help but exclaim. Leng Ro could not bear to watch. Everyone from Misty Peak knew that this slim chance of survival was fought for by Su Zimo single-handedly. Right now, there was no longer any perfected being Jin Dan who cared about their lives. Even the number of Foundation establishment cultivators blocking their path had decreased by more than half. Almost everyone's attention was drawn to Su Zimo. "Hurry, let's go." Qin Yu grit his teeth and waved his arm, hollering. At this moment, indecisiveness and hesitation would only cause everyone's deaths. Qin Yu and Ji Qingtian worked together and walked at the front, releasing spirit arts continuously. Enhanced by the sect's secret skill, the flying swords shuttled through the battlefield and blood splattered everywhere. Although everyone from Misty Peak was covered in injuries, they endured their pain and pulled themselves together, following closely behind the two of them and killing their way out of Dongling Valley. On the other side, Su Zimo was in a terrible state. Previously, he had expended almost all the spirit energy in his dantian when he released the Fiend Suppression Seal. Thereafter, he was mentally and physically exhausted after resisting the corrosion of blood slave art. Finally, he burst forth with his peak state and killed the blood-robed youth cleanly in 3 rounds, expending the last of his stamina. Right now, Su Zimo was at his weakest. Not far away, the 4 perfected being Jean Dan sped over with murderous auras. Dense swarms of blood-eyed crows and hundreds of Blood Crow Palace Foundation establishment cultivators swarmed over. Dust billowed and killing intent filled the air. Even under such circumstances, Su Zimo's face did not show any signs of panic, his eyes were calm and his expression was calm. He was channeling a secret skill. There was a Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra recorded on the lid of the stone coffin in the inheritance ground of the Fiend sections. That secret skill originated from the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and was called Blood Escape. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was all about the usage of bloodlines and described how to activate the power of one's bloodline. The Blood Escape technique was no exception. Once the Blood Escape technique was released, a third of the bloodline would be burned in exchange for a burst of speed for a short period of time, allowing the user to escape 1,000 miles away. Of course, the Blood Escape technique also had very obvious side effects. After 1/3 of their bloodline was burnt, both human beings and demons would become extremely weak. Their limbs would turn cold, and they would find it difficult to breathe. They might even pass out. How long this state of weakness would last depended on one's physique. The stronger one's physique was, the shorter the time it would take to return to normal. But if there were no accidents, it would take at least 10 days to half a month of recuperation to completely recover. Su Zimo had no choice but to turn around and flee. However, the direction behind him was the opposite of Misty Peak. If he really used Blood Escape, the distance between Su Zimo and Misty Peak would only increase. Su Zimo had no choice but to turn around and flee. Su Zimo circulated the Heart Sutra of the Blood Escape art. Forming a hand seal, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a stream of essence blood. Dong! 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 Suddenly, Su Zimo's heart thumped violently, as though it was about to leap out of his chest. It was deep and powerful, as though someone was beating a heavenly drum. With every beat of his heart, a stream of scarlet blood would flow through his limbs and bones. A faint layer of flames burned on the surface of the blood. It was extremely strange and exuded endless power. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo turned around and released Divine Steed Fleeting, sprinting out of Dongling Valley. Swash! Su Zimo turned into a streak of blood light and disappeared from everyone's sights in the blink of an eye. It was too fast. Everyone was stunned for a moment and their eyes were dazed. After a few breaths, the 4 perfected Jean Dan were the first to react. They burst forth with full speed and chased in the direction Su Zimo had disappeared in. A secret skill as such must exhaust the potential of a living being in exchange for a temporary burst of power. That lad won't be able to last long. Let's chase after him. That's right. That lad will definitely become extremely weak once he stops using a secret skill as such. The few perfected Jean Dan in midair had sharp eyes and saw through the nature of Blood Escape before long. One of the Jean Dan perfected beings hollered, "Blood Crow Army, find traces of that man. Don't alarm him after you find him. Just follow him and wait for our reinforcements." Caw! Caw! An ear-piercing cry sounded from the blood-eyed crows that filled the skies, as though they were responding. Soon after, the many blood-eyed crows entered the void, disappearing without a trace. Although the blood-eyed crows were only Foundation Establishment spirit demons, their speed in midair was not inferior to that of perfected Jean Dan. Su Zimo sprinted with all his might. Although he did not turn back to look, Su Zimo could guess that this group of cultivators of unknown origins would definitely not give up and would be following him closely. The blood in his body was still burning. Su Zimo had to escape from everyone's pursuit after a third of his blood was burned. blood escape could increase one's speed by a few times in a short period of time. However, the increase was not limitless, it was based on the cultivator's foundation. After all, Su Zimo was only a foundation establishment cultivator. In other words, Su Zimo might not be able to surpass perfected Jin Dan in terms of speed after using blood escape. Perfected Jin Dan's cultivation realm was a level higher than his. Before long, Su Zimo arrived at a dense forest. After sprinting for a while, Su Zimo suddenly stopped in his tracks. In a flash, he pounced towards a leopard that could not dodge in time. That leopard could only be considered as a wild beast that had just gained sentience. Although there was some spirituality in its eyes, it did not know how to cultivate yet. Su Zimo coiled the blood-robed youth's head around the leopard's tail and threatened, "Run as far as you can. Don't take it off in the middle." Sensing the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes, the leopard was so scared that its heart skipped a beat and it nodded hurriedly. Su Zimo released his grip and the leopard left the place in fear. When it was far enough away, it fled as fast as it could. Su Zimo turned back and sneered. He had to do something to distract his pursuers. Su Zimo believed that the leopard would be enough to distract his pursuers and cause them to be confused so that they would not be able to determine his escape route. Su Zimo took a deep breath and continued sprinting forward. After an unknown amount of time, the power of the blood escape technique had been exhausted. This meant that a third of Su Zimo's blood had been burned. The moment Su Zimo came to a stop, he felt the world spin and he almost fell to the ground. Su Zimo adjusted his breathing and clenched his fists, trying his best to keep his mind clear as he staggered forward. He could not fall asleep just like that. He was not truly out of danger yet. He had to find a relatively secluded place and set up some simple formations so that Su Zimo could hide without worry. Before long, Su Zimo found a cave at the foot of a mountain not far away. Su Zimo walked around inside and heaved a sigh of relief when he did not discover any other demon beasts. Given his current state, he would have to fight a tough battle even if he encountered a spirit beast. Chapter 226. Su Zimo fell to the ground, feeling as though his tendons and bones were about to break. Enduring the pain, he carefully retrieved Night Spirit from his robes and hugged it to his chest. He was worried about Night Spirit. Even though Yu Fei's throat was crushed and he lost a large amount of blood qi, he was a Jin Dan realm spirit demon after all. His final counterattack was extremely terrifying. Even if Su Zimo was in Night Spirit's shoes, he could not guarantee that he would survive. However, when Su Zimo took out Night Spirit, he was stunned. In Dongling Valley, Su Zimo witnessed with his own eyes that Night Spirit was struck in the waist by Yu Fei. Its body was contorted and it coughed out blood. It was clear that its organs were severely injured and its fate was unknown. But now, Night Spirit's body had returned to normal. Night Spirit curled up in front of Su Zimo's chest. It was no longer bleeding from its mouth and its breathing was slow and steady. Sensing Su Zimo's gaze, Night Spirit suddenly raised its head and blinked its beady eyes. They were pitch black and resembled gemstones as it looked at Su Zimo spiritually. The man and beast looked at each other. Huh. When he saw that Night Spirit was fine, Su Zimo was delighted and could not help but laugh. Kia! As though it could sense the joy in Su Zimo's heart, Night Spirit opened its mouth slightly and called out in response. Su Zimo carried Night Spirit and checked it carefully. To his surprise, Su Zimo discovered that Night Spirit's self-healing abilities were extremely strong. Although it had yet to recover, the wounds in its organs were already healing and its broken bones were reconnecting. Ever since it escaped from Dongling Valley, Night Spirit had not consumed any elixirs and was relying solely on its own body to recover and adjust. It had been less than a month since Night Spirit was born. Of course, the greater the potential of Night Spirit, the harsher the conditions for growth. If they were dire beast cubs, their parents would also be powerful pure-blooded dire beasts. They would be able to prepare sufficient food and resources for their cubs. And now, Su Zimo was only a foundation establishment middle-stage cultivator. There wasn't much he could provide for the night spirit. Su Zimo took out Yu Fei's inner core from his storage bag and placed it under the night spirit's nose, wanting to feed it. Just now, if it weren't for the night spirit's attack, he would have been reduced to a blood slave of the blood-robed young man. Therefore, Su Zimo did not hesitate or feel any heartache when he fed the night spirit the monster core. Night spirit's nose twitched, and he sneezed. He turned his head away and pursed his lips. His eyes were filled with disdain. Seeing this scene, Su Zimo was a little speechless. That monster core could be considered as his most precious item from head to toe. To think that the other party wouldn't even fancy it. You must be crazy to not want to eat something so good. After escaping death and seeing that night spirit had survived, Su Zimo was in a great mood. He could not help but curse jokingly and put away the demon beast's inner core, preparing to consume it later on. I'll put you down first. I'll go out and set up some formations. Let's hide here for a couple of days. Su Zimo said to Night Spirit. Unexpectedly, Night Spirit arched its body and tried to burrow into Su Zimo's embrace, as though that was the most comfortable place. Su Zimo could not tolerate it and stuffed it back into his embrace. He went to the entrance of the cave and started setting up formations. After burning a third of his blood, Su Zimo was extremely weak. However, he did not dare to rest. He had to seize every second to set up a few formations so that Su Zimo could be at ease. Su Zimo withdrew the demon beast inner core from his storage bag and swallowed it. Su Zimo was prepared to release Blood Escape once more. Using Blood Escape twice in a row meant that 2/3 of his blood would be burned and there was a high chance that he would die. However, Su Zimo had no other choice. He could only consume the demon beast inner core in advance in case of any accidents. Su Zimo was already at his weakest. If he did not release Blood Escape, he would not be able to escape far and would definitely be caught by perfected Jean Dan. Su Zimo withdrew the map from his storage bag and studied it carefully. Before long, Su Zimo put away the map and channeled Blood Escape. Transforming into a streak of blood light, he changed his direction slightly and sprinted. Chapter 227. This time round, Su Zimo was no longer fleeing aimlessly. There was only one place to avoid the blood-eyed crow's surveillance. Jishui River. After all, the blood-eyed crows were only Foundation establishment spirit demons and had yet to form their inner cores. They could not convert their external breathing into internal breathing and naturally could not enter Jishui River. However, Su Zimo was different. He cultivated both immortality and demonic. Although he did not have an inner core, he could use spirit energy to form a light barrier around his body to isolate the river water. The map showed that Jishui River ran through the entire territory of the Great Zhou dynasty. No one knew where Jishui River flowed to or where its source was, and it was not shown on the map either. However, that was not important. What Su Zimo had to do was to enter Jishui River and follow the flow. That way, he would be able to avoid the blood-eyed crow's tracking. He sprinted the entire way, chasing after the stars and moon. By the next morning, he finally arrived at the banks of Jishui River. The moment he arrived, Su Zimo's face was pale and his consciousness was fading. If not for the fact that Su Zimo had consumed the demon beast's inner core beforehand and executed Blood Escape twice in a row, he would have been a dead man by now. No matter how strong his physique was, he would not be able to withstand burning 2/3 of his essence blood. This time round, his body was almost completely drained. Su Zimo staggered and lost his balance. Unable to control his body, he fell forward and fell into the river. Gurgle, gurgle. A series of bubbles appeared on the surface of the river. Su Zimo was stirred by the river water and shook his head. Struggling to stand up, he regained some of his consciousness. Night Spirit burrowed out of Su Zimo's embrace and floated in the river for a while. By the looks of it, Night Spirit was rather good in the water as well. Gritting his teeth, Su Zimo hugged Night Spirit and forcefully conjured a spirit energy barrier. With a leap, he disappeared into Jishui River. The river water was cold. For someone who had burned more than half of his bloodline, that coldness had already turned into a bone-chilling chill. Su Zimo's body was trembling. His eyes were wide open as he held on to Night Spirit and continued to dive. Su Zimo forcefully raised his spirit and did not dare to be careless. He held the supreme-grade flying sword in his left hand and constantly patrolled the surroundings. The Jishui River was not a good place. The degree of danger here was definitely not any less than that of the Great Desolate Jungle. There were also many powerful demonic beasts living in the Jishui River. If he was the slightest bit careless, he could very well be buried here. Su Zimo did not dare to dive too deep. Normally, the deeper the river, the stronger the demonic beasts that appeared. Right now, Su Zimo was surrounded by mostly chi condensation spiritual beasts that had just begun to cultivate. There were so many different types of aquatic demons that it was a dazzling sight. These spirit beasts only glanced at him from afar. None of them dared to approach him. Suddenly, these spirit beasts seemed to have been frightened by something as they scattered and fled at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, Su Zimo was alarmed. Diagonally, the river water surged and a huge water column came against the current. It was murderous and mighty. A spirit demon. A Foundation establishment spirit demon had appeared. Clang! 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 Su Zimo endured the piercing pain in his dantian and injected spirit energy forcefully. The sword trembled continuously. Su Zimo activated the supreme-grade flying sword right away, wanting to have a bloody battle with the spirit demon. However, his heart skipped a beat and he put away the flying sword. Whoosh! The spirit beast separated from the water and Su Zimo saw it clearly this time round. Green Armored Crocodile. The green armored crocodile was one of the more common demon beasts in the Jishui River. It was named the green armored crocodile because of the horn that was wrapped around its body that was indestructible like armor. The green armored crocodile was extremely fast in the water and arrived before Su Zimo in almost the blink of an eye. At that moment, Su Zimo felt as though he was not facing an aquatic demon beast, but a mountain. Swoosh! When the green armored crocodile arrived before Su Zimo, it opened its gigantic mouth without hesitation and swallowed Su Zimo with ease along with the river water. Standing in the mouth of the green armored crocodile, Su Zimo looked incomparably tiny but extremely calm. Seeing that the jaws of the green armored crocodile were about to close, Su Zimo took out his supreme-grade flying sword once more and activated the 4 spirit patterns on it. He said coldly, "You'd better not move." At that moment, Night Spirit extended its claws and landed gently on the green armored crocodile's tongue. It did not use much strength, but the green armored crocodile's tongue was already bleeding. "Now, listen to me." Standing in the mouth of the green armored crocodile, Su Zimo said slowly, "Right now, follow the Jishui River and head downstream. I'll borrow your stomach for the time being. I'll naturally leave once my injuries are healed. Furthermore, I promise you that I won't harm your life." The green armored crocodile had already cultivated to the level of a spirit demon and had long gained sentience. Su Zimo believed that the green armored crocodile would definitely be able to understand his words. Indeed, after a slight hesitation, the green armored crocodile nodded. That was a good choice. It could either trust Su Zimo, or it could die right now. Hugging Night Spirit, Su Zimo slid down the green armored crocodile's throat all the way to its stomach. At the same time, Su Zimo crushed the defensive talisman that Ling Ro gave him. A barrier of light surrounded Su Zimo. Although there was a slight stench in the stomach of the green armored crocodile, it was a perfect hiding place where no one would disturb him and he could calm down and recuperate. If Su Zimo was the one carrying Night Spirit through the Jishui River, Su Zimo would not have time to recuperate at all. This arrangement could be considered as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Su Zimo intended to stay in the stomach of the green armored crocodile for the time being. He would leave this place and return to the shore after his and Night Spirit's injuries were healed. The green-armored crocodile wagged its tail and swam down the river, vanishing from the spot. 3 days later, a large number of blood-eyed crows circled the skies above the Jishui River, covering the skies in a dense pack. Peng Yu and the other cultivators who participated in the Battle of Dongling Valley stood on the shore, looking at the gushing river in silence with terrible expressions. Before they set off, there were 10 perfected Jin Dan. But now, there were only 6 left. Peng Yu's face was yellow and he seemed to be seriously injured. He had rushed here before he could recuperate. The number of Foundation establishment cultivators was also reduced by half. Caw, caw. Before long, an ear-piercing cry sounded from the distant horizon. The blood-eyed crows paused for a moment before splitting into 2 sides in the skies, as though they were welcoming some powerful existence. Not long after, a huge, pitch-black blood crow king galloped over. On its back was a middle-aged man in blood-colored robes. His hands were behind his back, his face was thin and his gaze was dark. "Greetings, Palace Lord." Everyone from Blood Crow Palace knelt on the ground hurriedly and lowered their heads. Trembling, they did not dare to meet the Palace Lord's gaze. Gritting his teeth, Peng Yu mustered his courage and said, "Palace Lord." Peng Yu recounted everything that happened in Dongling Valley in detail. However, in reality, no one saw how Yu Fei died. That was also the greatest mystery of the entire incident. If Yu Fei did not die, the Blood Crow young lord would not have died with the protection of the Jin Dan realm spirit demon. Chapter 228. You mean to say that the combined forces of 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators and Jin Dan realm spirit demons died in the hands of a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, The Palace Lord looked at Peng Yu with ghastly green eyes. Although his tone was calm, there was an inexplicable coldness to it. There were so many people and it was supposed to be a massacre without any suspense. None of the people from Dongling Valley should have escaped. But, what happened in the end, Peng Yu and the others lowered their heads in the face of the Palace Lord's questioning. None of them dared to reply. The air seemed to have frozen, adding a murderous aura to it. Blood Crow Palace's Palace Lord exuded an extremely terrifying aura that could not be resisted. At that moment, all the cultivators who were kneeling before the Palace Lord felt extremely insignificant, as though they were facing a god of the universe. I can understand if perfected Jin Dan was the one who tried his best to escape. However, how did a mere Foundation establishment cultivator manage to escape from the encirclement of so many people, I just want to know how a Foundation establishment cultivator managed to escape. The Palace Lord's voice turned sharp and sharp. Many cultivators revealed pained expressions but none of them dared to make a sound. What trash! The Palace Lord's expression was cold and his glabella shone with a sinister glint. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he slowly extended his palm and pressed down in the direction of Peng Yu and the others. Suddenly, as though it was under immense pressure, the raging river came to a strange standstill. Poof! There was a crisp sound. Right in front of everyone, Peng Yu's body exploded into a blood mist and he died on the spot without a corpse left. When they saw that, everyone kneeling behind Peng Yu was completely stunned. They felt as though their hearts were gripped by someone and they even forgot to breathe. Peng Yu, who had cultivated the Jin Dan phenomenon, did not even have a chance to explain himself before he was killed just like that. The Blood Crow Palace's lord's gaze swept across everyone. Whichever person his gaze landed on, their faces would turn paler, as though they could smell death. I'll give you a chance to make up for your mistakes. Find Su Zimo for me. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. The moment the Blood Crow Palace's lord said that, everyone felt their hearts lighten as though they were relieved of a heavy burden, as though they had just taken a trip through the gates of hell. Soon, the crowd dispersed. Some dived into the Jishui River, while others followed the river bank to search for clues. Jieth, Jie. The Blood Crow King suddenly raised his head and screeched twice. The numerous blood-eyed crows circling in the sky seemed to have received some sort of order, and they all scattered. The Blood Crow King walked forward and said in a deep voice, "Master, I got them to search along the Jishui River. It's just that Jishui River is really too long. I really don't know where this Su Zimo will come ashore. Don't worry, I have my ways." The Blood Crow Palace Lord said with an indifferent expression. The Blood Crow King seemed to have thought of something as his eyes lit up. He nodded and said, "That's right. The young lord had used the blood slave spell on this person. Although the young lord was dead, the power of the spell must still remain in this person's body. As long as you use your secret skill to search, you'll definitely be able to locate this lad. Yes, there's something about this Jishui River that can isolate my secret skill from searching." A vicious glint flashed through the Blood Crow Palace Lord's eyes as he said coldly, "However, as long as this lad leaves Jishui River, I'll definitely know." At that moment, Su Zimo did not know that he had accidentally dodged a huge calamity by sneaking into Jishui River in order to avoid the blood-eyed crow's pursuit. After entering the green-armored crocodile's stomach, Su Zimo's consciousness was already close to blurry. The damage to his body from releasing blood escape twice in a row was way too great. Su Zimo tried his best to maintain his consciousness and opened the blood-robed youth's storage bag. Without even looking, he poured out everything inside. Su Zimo found a few bottles of healing elixirs and swallowed them. Keeping the rest of the items, he began to recuperate. Prior to this, Su Zimo had consumed a demon beast's inner core and a massive amount of essence energy was sealed within his body. With the help of the demon beast's inner core and elixirs, Su Zimo began to cultivate before long. Huff! Huff! Growling! Tiger leopard thunder sounded. Essence energy regenerated endlessly in his organs and his bones crackled. Blood was constantly regenerated like a trickle, causing Su Zimo's body to regain its vitality. Time passed by rapidly. After a long time, Su Zimo's body finally recovered and his injuries were completely healed. Splash! Splash! Boom! Boom! The bloodline in Su Zimo's body surged like a tidal wave. Within the surging bloodline, endless lightning flashed and mixed with a deep rumble of thunder, causing one's heart to shudder. The stomach of the green-armored crocodile was filled with extremely rich demonic chi that was almost corporeal. All of that demonic chi was produced after Su Zimo's cultivation. The green-armored crocodile was shocked to discover that its physique had improved under the tempering of the demonic chi as well. To think that this is a demon beast that has formed a core. I've misjudged. The green-armored crocodile took Su Zimo as a demon beast that had cultivated an inner core and was merely in human form right now. After an unknown period of time, Su Zimo's eyes opened like a meteor streaking through the night, shining brightly with a divine light. Su Zimo's clothes fluttered and a tiny head popped out, blinking its bright, pitch-black eyes that were filled with spirituality. The man and beast exchanged glances and Su Zimo smiled. Surviving a calamity was always a joyous thing. After refining the demon beast's inner core, Su Zimo made some progress in the organs refinement section as well. Although there was still a long way to go before he reached greater mastery of the organs refinement section, it was already rather difficult. I wonder if Little Fatty, Ling Ro and the others managed to escape. I wonder how Peak Master Wen Xian and Elder Yu are doing right now. At the thought of everyone from Misty Peak, Su Zimo sighed internally. As of now, he did not know the background of the faction that attacked them in Dongling Valley. However, it was clear that the other party came prepared. On the one hand, the other party was seeking revenge in the Battle of Dongling Valley. After all, Su Zimo was the one who killed all the cultivators of that faction outside Linfeng City. However, the greatest possibility was that the other party was doing it for the sect competition. The sect competition would determine the spirit, elixir, talisman and weapon ranking lists. Only those who were ranked in each of the top 10 would be qualified to enter the ancient battlefield. Although the ancient battlefield was extremely dangerous, it was way too important for every Foundation establishment cultivator. Danger meant opportunity. In every sect competition, Ethereal Peak occupied the most spots on the spirit ranking and would definitely occupy 3 of them. Now that the 3 legacy disciples of Misty Peak were gathered, what would it mean if the blood-robed youth took all 3 of them in as blood slaves under his control? It would mean that the blood-robed youth would be able to take up at least 3 spots in the sect competition. Given the blood-robed youth's strength as a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, he could even take up 1 spot. That was 4 spots. If the blood-robed youth enslaved a few more powerful Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, there was a high chance that all the spots on the spirit ranking would belong to him. In reality, that was the intention of the Blood Crow Palace's lord as well. It was all for the sake of ensuring the safety of the Blood Crow young master as much as possible in the ancient battlefield. However, it was a pity that everything was for naught. The Blood Crow young master did not die in the ancient battlefield but outside. Chapter 229. After recovering from his injuries, Su Zimo did not linger in the stomach of the green-armored crocodile for too long. Ascending the riverbank, Su Zimo rode on his sword and patrolled the surroundings before taking out a map to compare. As he had expected, he was getting further and further away from Misty Peak. Given his current location, it would take him a month to return to Misty Peak even if he sped without rest. Right then, Su Zimo frowned. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his mind without any warning. Right after, Su Zimo's vision blurred, as though he saw the blood-robed youth who was already dead standing before him with a strange expression and a sinister smile. A strange green color appeared in Su Zimo's eyes and paused for a moment before disappearing. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes with a terrible expression. Although the blood-robed youth was already dead, there was still the remnant power of the blood slave art in his body. Furthermore, he did not notice it when he was recovering from his injuries earlier on. The cultivators of that mysterious faction knew some extremely strange methods that were unpredictable and impossible to guard against. Just now, was this strange pain a coincidence or was someone manipulating it from behind the scenes? Su Zimo's gaze flickered and he fell into deep thought. He was more inclined to believe that someone was behind this. After all, he had never felt such a sharp pain when he was in the stomach of the green-armored crocodile. However, it appeared not long after he left Jishui River. That was too much of a coincidence. Furthermore, if someone was manipulating it from behind the scenes, what was that person's motive? Are they trying to determine whether I'm dead or alive, or are they trying to track me down? After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo let out a long breath and murmured, "They're truly persistent." If his guess was correct, it meant that he might be able to avoid the other party's detection in Jishui River. However, Su Zimo could not stay in Jishui River forever. He had to think of a way to deal with it. If he wanted to take drastic measures, there were only 2 ways. The first was to think of a way to get rid of the remnant power in his body. The second was to think of a way to get rid of his pursuers. Neither of those 2 paths was realistic and Su Zimo could not do it with his own strength. Su Zimo had no clue about the first path. Su Zimo had a vague idea about the second path. Of course, the second path was way too dangerous and there was a high chance that he would die. Su Zimo opened the map again and searched for his next destination. There were some dangerous places marked on the map. Some of them were labeled with danger, some were vague. Among them, there was a small blood-red fork drawn on one of the spots. The color was extremely heavy. That proved that was the most place. Su Zimo knew very little about this place and only knew that it was a ruin. A ruin from the primordial era. The primordial era was too far away from the present, so there weren't many things left behind. However, there must be something special about the fact that the primordial ruin could be preserved to this day. A vicious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he put away the map and sped in the direction of the primordial ruin. Let's see what dangers there are in the primordial ruin and if they can kill you guys. Su Zimo intended to lure his pursuers to the primordial ruin. At that moment, it was almost evening. Su Zimo did not rest and sprinted. He did not know who the cultivators chasing after him were or what their cultivation realms were. However, the earlier he arrived at the primordial ruin, the higher his chances of killing everyone behind him. Morning. Su Zimo was travel-worn and finally arrived at the periphery of the primordial ruin. When he arrived, Su Zimo was shocked to discover that there were many cultivators around. There were Qi condensation and foundation establishment cultivators and even some Gene Dand perfected ones standing in the air. At a single glance, there were tens of thousands of cultivators gathered here. It was a shocking sight. There were even a few cultivators among them. There was a high chance that they were Jinying Jinjuan. At the nascent soul realm, one could no longer tell their cultivation realms with the spirit-peering art. Su Zimo merely felt that the auras of those people were terrifying and were even stronger than perfected Gene Dand perfected ones. Something's not right, Su Zimo was confused. Initially, he thought that those people were specially waiting for him here because they were recruited by the mysterious faction. If that was the case, the methods of the mysterious faction were truly unpredictable. However, after observing for a while, Su Zimo discovered that those people were clearly not from the same sect. Instead, they came from all over the world. Su Zimo was even more confused. Although he had yet to truly step foot into the primordial ruin, what was the point of gathering so many cultivators here? Of course, in order to hide his identity, Su Zimo had already placed his sect's identity badge into his storage bag. Fellow Daoist, what are all of you gathered here for? Su Zimo asked a random itinerant cultivator at the Qi condensation realm. When the itinerant cultivator saw that Su Zimo was a foundation establishment cultivator, he revealed a respectful expression. That person cupped his fists. Fellow Daoist, you don't know. A month ago, in the primordial ruin ahead, there was a golden beam of light that shot into the skies. It lasted for a long time and even attracted lightning and thunder. Before Su Zimo could say anything, another itinerant cultivator who was passing by could not help but interject, I heard that it was a rainbow glow and was extremely extraordinary. I heard that there were even dragon roars and phoenix cries. TSK, I even saw a true dragon. Although it was just a scale and a claw, it was shocking enough. Each of its scales is bigger than our bodies, and its claws are longer and sharper than our flying swords. More cultivators from the side came over and commented as though they were telling the truth. Spittle flew everywhere and their eyes shone brightly. It was clear that they were bragging and were getting more and more mysterious. Su Zimo did not really understand and asked again, So, this proves that there are definitely treasures in the primordial ruin ahead. Furthermore, the treasure has just been born. There's also another possibility. The restrictions of a cave abode of a powerful existence in the primordial ruin have disappeared and there are too many treasures within, causing a change in the world. Yes, it might be a legacy left behind by a sect from the primordial era that's waiting for me to inherit. The surrounding cultivators chimed in with their own guesses. But I heard that the primordial ruin is a place of great danger. Su Zimo added. Yes. Someone nodded. That's a rumor. However, very few people know what dangers lie within. Since ancient times, cultivators have died here almost every year. Of course, it's dangerous. However, it's a primordial ruin after all and there are many things left behind from the primordial era. If you manage to pick up a treasure, you might be able to soar. At that point, many cultivators' eyes shone with excitement. If something left behind from the primordial era was still intact, it would definitely be a treasure. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.